This is a virtual meeting using the Zoom platform. Members of the public can view this meeting live on Channel 8 or the city's website. Live Spanish translation services are being provided for tonight's council meeting by telephone. Please dial 720-386-9023 and use code 104091 star. If you're a council member, please be sure to have your video camera on and be mindful that we are streaming this meeting on Channel 8 and on our city's website. The chat function has been disabled to ensure that the public can see all portions of the meeting. The city clerk is the host of the meeting, and I and our IT staff will be the co-host. Council members and panelists will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. Please mute yourself when you have finished speaking, and remember to lower your virtual hand to prevent disruptions. Members of the public who have registered to speak will be recognized at the proper time. As a reminder, we will use roll call votes only when required by law or when requested by a council member or the clerk. Other votes will be voice votes counted by raising hands in the Zoom app or as the chair determines. If a member disagrees with the stated outcome of the vote or feels that their vote was not properly heard or is not recognized, the member should immediately request the mayor's attention. This time I will call the meeting to order and ask the city clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Huseman. Mayor Huseman. Mayor Pro Tem Frank. Councilmember Madera.
Present.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Present.
Mr. Gibson, can we call the roll, please?
Mayor Huseman, Deputy City Clerk Jordan Roberts is currently calling the roll.
Hello?
Are you able to hear us?
Oh, now I can hear you. Sorry, technical difficulty there. Okay. Please
That's
proceed
okay.
with calling the roll.
All right.
All right. I will start over. Mayor Huseman.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Frank. Councilmember Madera.
Present.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Present.
Councilmember Noble. Councilmember Guardiola.
Present.
Councilmember Hirsch.
Present.
Councilmember Grimes.
Present.
Councilmember Smith.
Present.
And I do see Councilmember Noble here.
Yes, I am. I've been having audio problems.
Mayor Huseman, you have a quorum.
Thank you. At this time, I'm looking for a motion to excuse those members not present. Councilmember Grimes,
So moved.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to excuse those members not present. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we will take a voice vote. Please use your physical hands in the window so they can be counted. And that motion passes unanimously 8-0. This time we will do the Pledge of Allegiance. Will the city clerk please display the flag? And would like to invite all members on the webinar to join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America,
and
to the republic which stands
under
under liberty
liberty.
and justice for all.
Thank you, everybody. All public comment will occur during citizen communication except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak under multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Public hearing testimony will occur during the public hearing portion of the meeting. Does any council member wish to move to modify this practice? Seeing none, we will move to citizen comment. Per council policy, citizen communication is a time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. The city council is not able to hear any comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may become before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, we take your comments seriously, but do not generally respond to comments until later in the evening. Council must wait until administrative council business to take action in response to citizen communication. Council members can ask questions of speakers if desired. The city needed advanced registration in order to participate in citizen communication for this meeting. If you are currently in this meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. If a council member wants to ask a question, please ask to be recognized when the speaker is finished. Thank you. First on the list is Rana Sanchez to speak regarding the dog ordinance.
Rana, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Okay, my name's Rana Sanchez. I'm at 10680 Waco Street. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I'd like to wish all of you a happy new year, and I appreciate the work you do and the time you invest in our community. First, I'm speaking regarding the animal code. I know it's on the agenda, and I also know you will pass it. I would just like to comment and reiterate my concerns. The first one is pit bulls are dangerous. Second one, many dog owners are irresponsible. And number 3, and my biggest concern, is a 4-foot-high split rail fence will not keep dogs in, especially large dogs. Second, I urge you to recommend no renewal of the Suncor permits, or at least recommend holding Suncor to the strictest standards under any new permitting. I live in Reunion, and ever since I got here, I heard from City Council that we need to do more for Core Commerce City. We need to do better by the people there. We need to have a diversity council. I've heard that from all of you. Now you have a real legitimate way of doing something for Core Commerce City. Protect them from Suncor. Thank you.
Are there any council members that wish to ask any questions? Seeing none, we'll move to the next, which is Steve Strock, who also wishes to speak regarding the dog ordinance.
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you, Mayor, City Council. I spoke a couple times about the dog ordinance. As you know, we were attacked 3 times in 4 months by dogs. I have one dog who's blind in one eye, $7,000 in medical bills and vet bills. And the only thing the dog owner has is a $133 fine for a vicious animal and still has the dogs. If you're considering allowing pit bulls back in Commerce City, it just makes more sense now to increase those fines and penalties for owning a vicious dog. If those had been pit bulls that attacked our dogs, all 3 of my dogs probably would have been dead, not just severely injured. So it goes hand in hand to increase the penalties, increase the fines for a vicious animal if you're going to enact the pit bull ordinance. The second thing is I don't know if this is a city council purview, but when we go to restitution, I had a hearing last month, the most I can get from the owner is $2,500. I've got $7,000 in medical bills, and Commerce City has a law or ordinance or something that the most I can get is $2,500 from the owner. I'm wondering why that is so low and what we can do to raise that. I had to get an attorney because I would have been out over $5,000 already because the restitution is only $2,500 and my bills are over $7,000. So one, why is that so low? What can we do to raise that? What can we do to raise the penalty from $133? And how can we change the rule where it says a dog has to injure another animal twice before it can be removed from the home? Like I said, I got a dog that's blind in one eye, going to need lifetime trips to the vet at $500 a year for vet bills and medication. And the dog owner still has her 2 dogs. It just doesn't seem fair. It seems that the deck is stacked for the victim, against the victim, and in favor of the dog owners, and not the other way around as it should be. I'm not sure what else I can do to implore you to kind of balance the scales more for the victims as opposed to the dog owner. I don't know what else I can say. Thank you for your time.
Any council members have any questions for Mr. Strock? Seeing none, we'll move on to Mr. Steve Douglas, who wants to speak regarding Suncor.
Steve, you should be able to unmute yourself and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. Happy New Year, City Council, and good evening, Mayor and City Council. I'm here tonight to speak on the letter that you guys would like to challenge Suncor. I appreciate that. This will be the first time in Suncor's 90-year history there will be a challenge against them coming from the city and other outside agencies. And hopefully the state will also make sure they comply with stricter standards, because here's the opportunity to make things right. It's hard to heal in a community that affects your health on a daily basis. And it's hard to heal. It's also to make yourself better if you're not in that environment. But it makes it very hard to get a clean bill of health living next to a facility like Suncor. So I commend those who supported the letter for CDPHE, but for those who did not, you need a history on what's happening in Commerce City. This is long overdue. So next time something like this comes up, it should be unanimous. It should not be 6-3 or 7-2. So I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Are there any council members who wish to ask any questions of Mr. Douglas? Councilmember Hurst.
Good afternoon, Steve. Happy New Year to you as well. Hey, can I get some clarification on, we've not voted on any letter to Suncor yet. What we discussed last time was we're not going to just freely allow a letter to get sent without discussing what is in it. And so there was no vote. It was bring it to us so we can read it, have a discussion about it in public, and then vote on it. So we haven't voted on it yet. It could end up being unanimous. So I just don't want to make sure, I want to make sure we're referring to the right topic, because I haven't voted on a letter yet. That's really my main concern about the question and the comment there is there's been no vote.
Okay, well, I appreciate you asking me that question. I saw that in the agenda. It said that, as far as letter being brought forward, that you guys want to, is asking you guys to sign in on it for your support at the end. And when this was brought up, it was a 7-2 vote to bring a letter forward. So that's why I'm asking. This was unanimous.
Perfect. I appreciate it. I just want to clarify my position because you brought that up. I'm nothing wrong with against a letter, just an unseen letter without understanding the context of it was the issue that I had. And that's why I asked to bring it forward for discussion. Thank you.
I appreciate you asking me that. Thank you.
Any other council members have any questions for Mr. Douglas? Seeing none, we'll move on to Thaddeus Kokel. I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, who also wishes to speak about the dogs ordinance.
Thaddeus, if you're in the meeting, you can either hit *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Mayor Huseman, I do not see Thaddeus in the meeting.
Thank you. Next is Christina Hitrado. And again, I apologize if I mispronounced that, who also wants to speak on the dog ordinance.
Christina, if you could hit *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Mayor Huseman, I do not see Christina in the meeting either.
Okay, thank you. Thank you to all for speaking with us tonight. If follow-up is necessary, you should expect to be contacted by a staff member. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. Written comments were received by the deadline and incorporated into the updated agenda. If anyone wishes to speak at a future council meeting, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. Next on the agenda are presentations. The first presentation this evening is the COVID-19 update. Would like to invite Interim City Manager Roger Tinklenberg to provide an update on the city's overall response to the COVID-19 crisis.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Happy New Year to you. Really, there's not much to report to you because we gave you an extensive report back on the 28th. And even though that was last year, that was only a week ago. So just a couple items. We're still continuing at our same level of operation. And that includes the amount of time that the facilities are open to the public. Given the fact that the governor did change the level for Adams County, that does allow the Bison Grill to reopen at limited capacity. So that's one change, but in terms of facilities, we have not changed anything else in our facilities since the COVID-19 numbers continue to remain quite high. So just wanted to give you that kind of a quick update. Also, there is a change on the website. The Invisio dashboard that we used for our report last Monday is now up on the city website. And so that's available to both you and the public. That really is it. Ms. Blakeman had nothing else to report other than what I mentioned to you about the Invisio dashboard being up on the website. And, we continue to see a high level of applications for building permits and a high level of inspections being performed. So, we're still in that 165 to 170 land use cases. We crank them out the door and another one comes in the door. So the activity continues to be at a high level in spite of COVID-19. So I'll just leave it at that unless there are any questions for any of us.
Any questions from council to staff regarding the COVID-19? Seeing none, well, thank you, sir, for the update. We will move on to the next presentation, which is the Oil and Gas Monthly Update, and invite Dominic Martinelli, Environmental Planner, to make the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Mayor and City Council, and Happy New Year to all of you. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and start if I can get screen sharing enabled.
Yep,
I'll go
you
ahead
should
and
be
start.
good now, Dominic. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. So this is the Oil and Gas Monthly Update for January 2021. So city oil and gas permit applications, again, no update from last time. There's still 5 applications that are currently deemed complete. City staff wrapped up a review of the second round of comments and provided that to the applicant in December. We're going to be awaiting a resubmittal from them to continue processing the application. City permits, this map remains unchanged from the last update. Review schedule remains unchanged from the last update. There hasn't been no additional state permit applications, as well as the COGCC activity. So general updates, the oil and gas LDC ordinance, so that's ordinance 2266, has been scheduled for Planning Commission tomorrow on January 5th. A revised draft was posted on December 23rd on the city's website, as well as social media posts announcing that this new draft had been released. So bringing this forward to Planning Commission on January 5th, the plan would be is their recommendation would lead into City Council reviewing the oil and gas LDC ordinance on February 1st during a public hearing, and then could be potentially adopted on second reading on March 1st. So as you all know, we went through a relatively extensive process on the environmental consulting services. You all had an opportunity to interview the 2 finalists. The city has chosen to advance Lotus Engineering and Sustainability, and there are subcontractors that were proposed as part of the proposal, including Pinion Environmental and AMBG Consulting. That process is undergoing to negotiate the contract, and we're anticipating to potentially bring that back to you all for consideration in February. So the air monitoring sub-proposal that we discussed on December 21st was submitted to the CDPHE Evaluation Committee for review. That included letters of support from the interim city manager and the mayor, as well as Tri-County Health Department. The city anticipates hearing back by March 31st if the proposal was selected for funding. This is the deadline that CDPHE has listed. and they may or may not extend that depending on how the review process goes and finalizing the committee and things of that nature. So Councilmember Noble asked for an update on the Edmondson pad in Adams County. We did reach out to Adams County staff regarding the status of that permit. So a Form 2A application has been issued by the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission, but is still waiting on the approval of Form 2 permits, which are the permits for the individual well bores. An administrative use by special review, which is the land use permit that the county issues for oil and gas permits, has been issued. All permits must be in hand before the county will give them a notice to proceed, so they would not be able to proceed with construction until receiving those Form 2 applications. And then you'll see a vicinity map shown below, generally showing the location of this roughly around Sable on 132nd Avenue, close to E470. So a quick update on the Suncor Title V permit renewal process. So this is talking, just to be clear, about the state's review of the Title V permit issuance. So the refinery, as you may know, is divided into 3 plants. So plants 1 and 2 are major suppliers of gasoline and diesel fuel for Colorado. And then plant 3 is the state's main producer of asphalt in Colorado. The Title V permits are required by the Clean Air Act and set limits on the amount and type of air pollutants that Suncor's plants can emit and determine what air pollution emissions Suncor must monitor, what records they keep, and what type of reports that Suncor would file with the state. Permit renewals are generally required every 5 years by the state. And while that time duration has expired, so the 5-year permit limit, CDPHE continues to allow operations until a permit decision is rendered on the Plant 2 renewal. So since CDPHE submitted an application to renew that, the permit's not expired, but the time duration that's listed is in limbo. But they'll go through the process to renew that, and then would be able to continue operation upon renewal. So as we always post the oil and gas monthly update presentation on the city's website, we did provide a number of links for this one. So there's additional information provided from the state on the Title V renewal process, additional information and documentation on that. There is a number of public engagement efforts that the state's going through regarding this process. The first one is a listening session scheduled for January 7th with the registration link provided. The official public comment period will open on the Title V permit review between January 15th and February 15th. And then comments can be sent to the email listed there. And then there's additional information coming on this, but there are a number of small community conversations that the state is going to be organizing with a number of community members and stakeholders between January and March. So as we get additional updates with that, we'll provide you with that. So CDPH information on Suncor. Since the last update, there was one exceedance that was listed, which is a routine maintenance event that occurred on December 18th. The sulfur dioxide limit of 500 pounds for a 24-hour average was exceeded by 501. That was the only violation from that time period. And then as a reminder, we do include Suncor's written monthly report with every oil and gas monthly update that's included in the attachment as an attachment of this packet. And this month's presentation includes documentation and a narrative provided by Suncor discussing the Title V permit renewal process, a number of community investments that have been made, Suncor's response to the Magellan midstream pipeline incident that occurred last month, and then an overview of a proposed community air monitoring program that Suncor is contemplating. And with that, I am available to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes, thank you very much. And thank you for the information on the Edmondson well site, the pad, that's 24 wells. The site is located in unincorporated Adams County, and the directional well bores will travel under the Outlook neighborhood down to 120th and cross over to Buckley Road. So that's why I wanted to know about it, because it directly impacts residents in Ward 4, which I represent. So thank you for that. I'm not sure that the map that you posted actually shows the impact of this site. So I wanted to make that clear. With regards to the exceedances, I have a little bit different information than we have received in December and today. So today it was 1 exceedance, and in December it was 0 exceedances. And according to the Suncor report, alone in November, they had 50 exceedances related to air emissions. That's in the attachment that we receive from Suncor directly. So I think that we want to make it clear that it wasn't 1 exceedance for December or November, but actually 50. According to that.
We can certainly look into that and make sure that the timeline and reporting period that they listed was concurrent with how we posted that. So we basically on these reports go from the last update to the next one. And I think they might be going on slightly different timelines.
Yes, it appears that their last report provided data up to the morning of November 25th. And they said accordingly, total exceedances for November included 50 exceedances related to air emissions. So that seems to be quite a number to not have reflected in December or January. So that would be good to be able to clarify that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff regarding the oil and gas monthly update? Councilmember Hurst.
Thanks for the presentation, Dominic. I just wanted to, this is not trying to rebut anything. I just want to really try to understand, because it's something that I thought about after we heard this in the past. How many of those exceedances, because they're self-reporting by requirement, how many of those exceedances never left the stack? They talked in some detail about the way the reporting works, and some of them, it's burned off before it ever leaves the stack as an actual exhaust, according to how they described it. I'm no expert in that. So it's really hard when looking at that to determine, you know, when they say they had 50, but, you know, 10 of them really never left the stack. It's really hard for us to be able to distinguish that. Is there any way, or is there anywhere else that they get more granular on the breakdown of what those exceedances are and what kind of the impact is? Or is that just not something that is known yet or being tracked?
So what we can do is in preparation for the February report, we can work with Suncor and the CDPHE reporting information to see if we can get a little bit more granular on that data and get more in depth for you all to provide a little bit more clarity as to what's occurring and exactly how it's happening. I know that we typically go and review the Colorado environmental records to provide you the data that we discuss on a monthly basis. That data field and that portal doesn't get as deep and defined as you're describing, but I know that there's additional data that's being gathered and being reported that we can potentially look into including in the update. So I guess, and Jason, if you want to weigh in a little bit as well as to what we could potentially offer, I think we can certainly look and see if that's possible to incorporate into the presentation.
So Dominic, you know, I understand that type of data, when you're getting granular, can take time. You're not going to get it in real time. You're probably not going to get it within a week or two. I would just like to see if there's availability of that more granular data, maybe every 6 months or every year, because tracking it may not, you know, we might think something happened in December because of the initial reporting. You go back and it could be worse when they kind of finalize that reporting in March, or it could be, you know, it could be better. You never know. But you have initial reports, and then you have people who basically fine tune and fine comb that data and get the real information out of it beyond just the raw data. So that's really all I'm looking for. I don't want you guys to spend an extra hour working on, you know, finding this for me, because I'm not opposed to you just sending me an email address or a website address if you know where that's at. I just kind of like to look at how those details are broken down so we can better explain what's going on there.
As far as I'm aware, I believe they do generate a quarterly report. So these reports that we do on the monthly basis are the initial exceedance that when Suncor has a reading at the refinery that exceeds a defined threshold, they're required to notify the state as part of the Title V permit. I believe they do a little bit more due diligence on a quarterly basis and report that out. I'll see if we can look into that and talk to our connections at CDPAG and see if that's something that can kind of respond to what you're describing and provide a little bit more clarity.
And Dominic, I'm going to be honest, where I'm really, just trying to understand off the reporting is that there's EPA standards for air quality and pollution, obviously. And sometimes those permits are stricter than the EPA standards. So when there's a violation, it's still well under the legal limit. Sometimes it's the opposite. It doesn't matter, they far exceed the EPA's legal limit. But understanding that they violated a permit, but it was still well below the EPA's legal, safety limit due to dispersion. I mean, we could be talking about something that, is addressed through the data. They show that there's, it's not the same as, 50 violation sounds. Once you start getting the granular data, it might not be as bad and it could be worse. And that's really, I'm trying to get the full story is really what I'm trying to say. So if we can get that quarterly report or turn it into an annual or 6 month, I'd appreciate that. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Council Member Noble.
That information is reported regularly, and I did provide the website address to the city staff, so I think that we should be able to get it. I'm certainly happy to do that again. Suncor has to do this on a regular basis, whatever their quarterly or semi-annually or annual reports would be to agencies, of course, that they're required to do for their permits. But whenever anything occurs, they have to report it. The self-reporting involves has an impact on how much they're penalized. So I think that anybody can get it, and we should actually post the website address on our Commerce City website with Suncor information so that our residents can look up this information as well in real time. I'll get that information to you again. Thanks.
Any other questions or comments regarding the oil and gas monthly update? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Thank you, Mr. Martinelli, for your time this evening.
Thank you.
The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of the council may ask to remove a specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 6 items listed under the consent agenda. Does anyone on council wish to remove an item off the consent agenda for further discussion? Councilmember Noble.
Yes, I have 2 that I would like to pull. The first one is ordinance 2308. Do you want to do them one at a time, or how would you like to handle this, Mr. Mayor?
Just tell me the 2 that you want to pull.
Okay, ordinance 2308 and resolution 2021-02.
Very good. Any other council members wishing to pull an item off of the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as modified. Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to approve the consent agenda as modified.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as modified, which includes the removal of resolution 2021-02, as well as ordinance 2308. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the deputy city clerk please read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes 21-02, minutes of December 21st, 2020. Ordinance V-89-21, an ordinance vacating a portion of Pariah Street right-of-way south of 104th Avenue in the Turnberry subdivision, Commerce City, Colorado. Ordinance 2310, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by appropriating $225,268 from the general fund to address homelessness through intergovernmental and other efforts, and the recruitment of the community navigator and authorization of the expenditure thereof. Resolution 2021-01, resolution authorizing grant of easement to Comcast of Colorado, number 9 LLC, for the broadband communication system. Councilmember Madera.
Yes, I think you read one of the resolutions that was taken off, though. Wasn't resolution 2021-01 removed?
02 was removed.
2021-02.
Okay, sorry about that. Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 9-0 or 8-0.
Thank you. Before we go to the two poll ordinances, I do have a question for Mr. Sheasley. Ordinance 2308 appears to be on first reading. Should that not come to us twice as opposed to on the consent agenda?
Yes, it should have. I believe it was heard on first reading on December 7th. Is
Okay.
it?
The legislative, the legislative text just discusses the study session on November 9th. So that would answer that. Thank you.
Okay.
Council Member Noble, you wanted to pull ordinance 2308. Floor is yours.
Yes. Is this the one you just mentioned, Mayor?
Yes, it was.
Okay, well, it's the same point that I wanted to make. And also I had initially voted yes on it. And I realize that since the environmental services contract, which was for $250,000, might have gone through in a different fashion had it not, had this ordinance been in place, that perhaps the level is actually too high and that we should have a discussion about it. So I'm glad that we will need to vote on it as an ordinance.
Okay, do you have a motion to make, or did you just wish to make those comments prior to us voting on it?
Well,
I'd also be happy to address if there are questions as well.
I am recommending a no vote on this ordinance because I do believe that we need to make the decisions at down to the $100,000 level, that we should just leave it as it is.
Okay, any other questions or comments regarding ordinance 2308? Mr. Sheasley?
I would like to clarify for the purposes of the ordinance. It was approved on first reading on December 7th. Your current procurement policy brings anything over $250,000 to you for approval. Otherwise, a contract for services, for approval not of the contract, but of the selection and award. Otherwise, the code currently does not have council approval involved for any contract for services other than an intergovernmental agreement. So the city manager already has authority to sign contracts over a certain level, or of any level, essentially. And this ordinance really goes to addressing the authority of people below the city manager on the organizational chart to signing contracts there. So I don't know that it would have affected the outcome in the environmental services contract.
Councilmember Noble?
Then could you, and I apologize because I voted for it the first time, but frankly, I did not ask the most important question, which is why was this brought forward by staff? What is the purpose and what would be the advantage of having a subordinate of the city manager sign contracts for $250,000?
So the ordinance does not allow a subordinate of the city manager, unless the city manager delegates authority for the purpose of signing that contract, the ability to sign something under $250,000. The current law as it exists and has existed for some time, and I'm sorry, I'm losing track of things on my screen, allows for contracts for services under $2,500 to be signed by a division manager or a director on a pre-approved form, under $5,000 to $50,000 by the director of a department, and then anything over $50,000 the city manager can sign. That's signing of contracts. We also have a separate procurement policy, and I think the presentation in the packet goes into this, that has different dollar amounts at which the procurement is authorized. Council approval, through that policy, council set for the first time a dollar limit at which council approval of a contract or of a vendor was required, and that is set at $250,000, and we are not changing that here. What we are changing, and all we are doing with this ordinance as to service contracts, essentially, not intergovernmental agreements, is bringing up the authority amounts to match what the procurement policy allows. So for example, procurements can be authorized down to the division manager level at $10,000, between $10,000 and $75,000 by a department director, and then over $75,000 by the city manager, unless it hits $250,000, in which case the council has to approve that award. Intergovernmental agreements are a bit different. Right now, there is a dollar limit of up to $10,000 at which the city manager can sign an agreement with another government entity, or up to $100,000 if it furthers some policy or work plan item that council has specifically approved. So with regard to intergovernmental agreements, the ordinance raises that dollar amount to $25,000 and $250,000, which is if there is a work plan item, project, or agreement that council has already specifically approved. There's a lot in there. I know the presentation and study session went into it in a lot more detail, I think. But I hope that answers the question.
Thank you. Yes, we didn't have that in tonight's material. We only had the ordinance. But it wasn't as comprehensively explained at any study session as you did tonight.
Councilmember Hurst.
Oh, sorry, that hand is confusing me. Robert, can I please ask a question of, if say something like the environmental studies contract was coming up and it didn't quite meet the standard to come before us, and we felt it was important that we had a public discussion about that contract, is there a mechanism in which council can request that come to us for discussion?
There really is not. You budget for items for actions to happen and results to occur, and the city manager and staff are charged with doing that, and they do that by selecting vendors through the procurement policy, and they're granted that authority. And there's not a mechanism for calling that up that currently exists. And then for the contracts, contracts are signed and then typically they're effective. They don't typically get reported to council for review or call up at any point.
Yeah, I assume that'd be a lot of work. So in your opinion, does the signature authority have enough backing to have, or I guess, are the rules strong enough to really back the city for any of these purchases if something were to happen? Someone were to violate these policies and sign a contract that was not supposed to be signed. Do you feel confident in our rules that will protect the city in that situation?
I'm not quite sure what risk you're looking for. Contracts are all approved as to form by the city attorney's office. We have templates that go for that. Individual departments are responsible for drafting scopes of services and administering their contracts as well as their procurements. And I can't speak to that necessarily, that aspect of it. But I do believe these amounts would allow for city processes to move more quickly and for staff to act more quickly on items and for there to be less confusion with regard to the procurement policy.
So I appreciate that was that was very good response. I have the same, we did the same thing at the state, changed it to a higher level for the same reasons. Efficiency is just out the window if you at the lower numbers, and it's just gets too involved. So I support this as long as we feel like there's strong protection for the city. And what I mean by that is someone, you know, signs a contract kind of outside of their job title. Do we have the appropriate repercussions to kind of save the city from having to move forward with that contract, even though it was signed by a representative?
Sure, I've taken the position on several occasions that contracts signed by people without authority are not valid unless they're ratified. In some cases that has occurred where the city performed on that contract for a period of time, and then it turned out that then somebody learned about it. And that's an individual question of management for somebody to deal with. Arguably, there's possibility for prosecution in the municipal court that we have not proceeded with. But yes, I think people do monitor that, and we're making strides towards contract understanding and of roles and responsibilities and the importance of them. We are planning a series of contract trainings throughout the year this year as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I just think, you know, for anybody, $250,000 is a lot of money, and ensuring that on the front end, ensuring that we're protected if something happened, it's just good to have that discussion, I think, right now before we take this vote. So I appreciate your response.
Councilmember Madera.
Move to approve ordinance 2308.
Thank you. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes, well, I had a question as well. When was the last time the procurement policy was updated? Do we know?
I can answer the question, Mayor, but you do have a motion on the table.
I do. I'll come back to you, Councilmember Alan Thomas. Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance 2308. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes. Do you want me to state my question again? I
No
was
need.
curious. Okay.
Yeah. We actually amended the procurement policy in November or December of last year to cure some audit issues. But from its enactment in 2014, I believe the last update was in the fall of 2018 or 19. I can find that answer for you very quickly.
Okay, thank you.
And that was when we had updated all those dollar amounts. And the history of the procurement policy is that it got updated. It was implemented through a collaborative process in response to some prior fiscal issues, I guess, and contracting issues. It predates my time here. But the rollout kind of happened in tandem with its drafting almost. And so there's a lot of confusion as it got implemented to then match practices. And so it was an update to manage that.
Okay, thank you.
Is there any other discussion on ordinance 2308? Will the deputy city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2308, an ordinance amending section 2-4201 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code relating to the authority of city personnel to execute contracts. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
and Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. Next up, Councilmember Noble, you wish to remove resolution 2021-02. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. The reason that I did that is because the moratorium on rents, which had been enacted because of COVID-19, has ended as of January 1st. And I think that this is a very critical issue that our residents would be quite interested in, who are renters. It is about a landlord-tenant legal services program. And I think it needs to be discussed publicly. There is a presentation with it. And by having the information discussed, our residents will have a better idea of what's available to them should they encounter any issues with landlords or landlords with their tenants.
Are you making a motion or did you just wish to make comments?
I guess I'll make a motion to, I don't know what kind of motion to make, a motion to have a regular discussion about the resolution,
So you would
or to make the presentation.
like to continue this to the February 1st council meeting where a presentation can be given and council can be presented with the details of the program and vote on it at that time?
That's an excellent motion.
I have a motion to continue this item to February 1st where a presentation can be given and council can receive all the details of the program and vote on it at that time. Councilmember Wadiola.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to continue it to February 1st. As I said, is there any discussion? Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I just hate continuing this because this is such a beneficial program for our community. And all we're doing by continuing it is making it not available to our citizens for another month. So, you know, I think this is kind of one of those things where time is of the essence. And, you know, it was in our packet to go over. And I think, you know, it's really beneficial that we move on this and make sure that's available to Commerce City residents.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, it's going the same direction. I think it's a good program, and Councilmember Noble, I hear you. I think we should discuss this, and so I was going to see if we can if you would accept maybe an amendment that we approve it tonight with the request that we discuss in public either next week or next meeting, or that our communications teams makes a video with our partners on this.
I would accept a motion, an amendment to have it discussed at the next meeting and do a video, but not one or the other.
Okay.
Councilmember Grimes.
Sorry, I need to put my hand down. I was going to say the same thing.
Okay, I also would like to see this continued. This is one of those that I was disappointed to see in the actual consent agenda. I think there's a lot of questions, and although this program does have a lot of useful benefits, I think there's another side of the program that needs to be discussed as well. And so I think that having a lengthy conversation regarding whether or not this is a program that is fully supported should take place before we approve it. So.
Sure.
With that being said, we have a motion to continue it to February 1st. That'll be a voice vote. Please use your physical hands if you wish to continue this to February 1st.
Mr. Mayor, I accepted the amendment to
do it, yeah.
Yeah.
We can explore the video as well. Councilmember Wadiola, you seconded the motion. Are you good with that amendment? Thank you.
Yes, I am, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurst.
Never mind. I'll wait for the vote. Thanks.
All right. So once again, we're going to do a voice vote. So please use your physical hands if you wish to agree to continue this to February 1st. And looks like we have 6 votes to continue and 2 votes, Councilmember Smith and Councilmember Madera voting not to continue it to February 1st. So this item will be continued over till February 1st. Did you get that, Deputy City Clerk?
Yes, I did, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is a public hearing. Tonight's public hearing is Z 616-95-21, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the city of Commerce City. Tonight's public hearing will be to consider a zoning ordinance for 9940 Havana Street. I will remind council to use the public hearing only to ask questions, but not to express opinions or indicate how you will vote. Council members are not to provide testimony if you wish to participate in the decision. You should also rely only on facts developed in this hearing and in the record and apply those facts to the criteria in the Land Development Code. This time I will open the public hearing and invite Stacy Wasinger, City Planner, to make the presentation.
Stacy, you should be able to unmute yourself and share your screen if you're ready for the presentation, or I can drive if you'd like me to.
If you want to run the presentation, that'd be great. Thank you, Dylan. So good evening, Mayor, members of the council. This is Z616-95-21, which is a request at 9940 Havana Street to have a zone change to remove the existing zoning conditions on the site, as well as to rezone a portion north of the O'Brien Canal to public. So on the subject property map here, you can see that the entire triangle piece property between 96th Havana and Highway 2 there is currently zoned I2 with conditions, and that is cast lots 1 through 4 under that current ordinance. And this request is solely for lot 4, which is the highlighted portion there. So the request is to remove the zoning conditions, and then that crescent shaped piece north of the O'Brien Canal would be rezoned to public. Next slide, please. So the case history on this is that all 4 of those lots were rezoned or were annexed and zoned ag in 1985, and then rezoned to the I2 with conditions. And I'll get into the conditions a little more in the next slide. In 1995. In 1995, lots 1 and 2 were developed per a development plan that was approved by City Council, but lots 3 and 4 were not developed at that time. And no development plan has been approved by City Council per those conditions for lot 4 prior to this discussion here. So that's it was currently an undeveloped lot. Next slide, please. So these are the 4 zoning conditions that were part of that original 1995 zoning ordinance. Condition A is essentially applies primarily to lots 1 and 2, which were developed at that time, and in part talk about a buffer along the east portion of the site along Highway 2. That condition is not as applicable today because we do have buffering and landscaping requirements in land as part of the land development code that would be a little more robust than they were at the time in 1995. Condition B discusses that lots 3 and 4 did not have an approved development plan at that time and require a hearing before Planning Commission approval by City Council for a development plan. And then C is a little bit of additional to that any changes to an approved development plan by City Council would also have to be approved by City Council. So those 2 conditions were more common with zoning ordinances at the time. But with the current land development code and review processes and procedures, we do have a more robust review to make sure that all codes are met and all of those things are taken care of through an administrative review process for uses by right. So this wouldn't change, removing those conditions wouldn't change that any, conditional use or anything like that would still come before Planning Commission and City Council. This would just be for uses by right. And then condition D discusses the kind of a lapse period and when development has to be complete for a development plan approved by City Council. And again, the land development code now has lapse periods and standards in that code that removing this condition, they would just then default to the land development code and remove any kind of conflicts there. Next slide, please. So the applicant's request is to remove all 4 zoning conditions, leaving the underlying I2 zoning in place on the bulk of the 28-acre property, and then rezoning that approximately 1.87 acre tract north of the O'Brien Canal to public. That piece of the property is in the future land use map is designated as open space, whereas the portion south of the O'Brien Canal are designated for future land use industrial. So these 2 different zones would bring the property more into compliance with that future land use map. And there is a concurrent subdivision plat and development plan under the administrative review process that if the conditions are removed would be finalized through the administrative review process. And that would essentially just divide the 28 acres into 3 industrial lots with each with an industrial warehousing type building on it, with a total of a little over 300,000 square feet of building on those, with those 3 buildings combined. Next slide, please. So this is just a closer look at the existing conditions of the aerial of the site. The site itself is vacant, and the majority or all of the area below the south of the O'Brien Canal is future land use industrial. There's a ag zone immediately to the north, an industrial zone use to the south, and then north of the O'Brien Canal, we have that crescent shape, and then north of that is public zoning with future land use of park. And then as you can see across the Highway 2 and the railroad, there approximately 200 feet to the Eagle Creek neighborhood to the southeast. Did note that there are, and this will be a little more on the next slide as well, but with the proposal, there is a decent or some amount of buffering and landscaping both along that northern portion between the buildings and that industrial future land use that's currently ag, and along the east side along Highway 2. Next slide, please. So this is just the draft proposed development plan. You can see there are 3 buildings there, and then those landscape areas kind of on the north and eastern portion. Next slide, please. And so these next couple of slides are just the draft proposed building elevations to show kind of what the proposed view is from the right-of-ways. This building 1 is the westernmost building. So the west elevation of that's going to be most visible from Havana Street. Next slide, please. And building 2 is the middle building, and it kind of will be the mirror image of building 1. So its most visible site is actually going to be the east elevation. It'll be most visible from Highway 2. Next slide, please. And then building 3 is similar, where the east elevation is going to be the most visible of that building from Highway 2. Next slide, please. So based on the Planning Commission analysis, the Planning Commission found that the rezoning is justified in that removing the conditions would allow for more certainty in the development of the site and allow that administrative process and any future changes to the development plan to be found through the administrative process. And that similar conditions were common at the time that the zoning was adopted, but the current development processes and standards are more robust through the existing land development code and all the other city codes and processes. In addition to that, the rezoning that portion north of the O'Brien Canal to public does make it more consistent with the future land use plan. And the comprehensive plan goals for both the removal of conditions and rezoning to public are will meet those goals. And in addition to that, the proposed use and subdivision in those concurrent applications is consistent with both of these zoning requests, the removal of the conditions for an underlying I2 and the public zoning. Next slide, please. With this, there would be a public improvement agreement for improvements to, including the improvements to Havana Street. All the proposed development would have to still meet all city requirements, and including things like the no light spilling beyond the property line per the land development code, meeting all the buffering and landscaping requirements in the land development code. And in addition to that, there's no direct access to Highway 2, so traffic is being routed essentially through Havana Street, either to the north to 104th or south to 96th Avenue. Next slide, please. The applicant did hold a neighborhood meeting on October 12th. There was one attendee from the Eagle Creek neighborhood. The general discussion was about the development of the site and what it would look like, the type of buildings and uses, the height of the buildings and things like that. There was a summary of that meeting attached to the council packet for reference. Next slide, please. So in terms of the land development code zone change approval criteria, with the Planning Commission and the analysis of the rezone, it found that the zone change approval criteria was met, and that the change is compatible with the proposed development and surrounding land uses, that the area where the removal of conditions in the public zone is proposed on a portion of it and I2 on the rest, is part of an industrial area and is consistent with the city future land use plan and the development of industrial uses in the area. Next slide, please. So the required notification, public notification, all the documentation is in the file and all requirements were met for public notification. Next slide, please. And so with that, the Planning Commission recommendation from their December 1st public hearing was approval unanimously, recommended unanimously approval to the City Council regarding to this case. And part of the discussion was in that in 1995, the standards and processes that are in place now weren't in place. Those conditions were more common then, but are less necessary now because we have all of those review processes in place through the administrative review, that the removal of the conditions would create a more business-friendly environment for the site, allowing that development of the use by right of approximately 300,000 square feet of industrial building space and the associated jobs there. That the existing conditions have provided some uncertainty for the development of that property, and maybe part of why that property is still undeveloped at this point. And that the rezoning that portion north of the O'Brien Canal to the public zone does bring it into conformance with the future land use map and the comprehensive plan. Next slide, please. And so with that, staff will conclude our presentation and is available to answer any questions. The applicant is also present to speak and to answer any questions that council may have.
Thank you, Ms. Wasinger. The applicant present to make any comments?
Yes, good evening. You've got Brad Cooney with Kimley Horn. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members for your time this evening, and thank you, Stacy, for your presentation. Like I said, my name is Brad Cooney with Kimley Horn. We are the civil engineers for the project. In addition to myself, we have Randall Phelps with Kimley Horn, as well as Noam Newman and Jill Marcotte with Skinnell Properties, who is the developer. Skinnell Properties is a nationwide development firm, and both Jill and Noam are based here in Denver. See if I can share my screen here. Let me know when everyone can see that.
We can now, Brad.
All right, great. Well, this is going to be pretty quick. Stacy did a great job of going through all of the points that we're about to make, but just wanted to go through a quick presentation. So as Stacy had alluded to, here's our project site here, lot 4 of Cass Transportation Subdivision. We've got tract A, which is this crescent piece north of the O'Brien Canal. The majority of the development for this project is taking place on the south side of that O'Brien Canal. The property is currently zoned I2 with conditions, and this development is proposing to rezone this project to straight I2, remove those conditions. It removes unnecessary steps in the development review process, as well as unfavorable allowable uses. We'll go through and show how it meets all the criteria for approving of a rezone. Consistency with the comprehensive plan. Future land use for this site is industrial, which is consistent with the proposed use. The future land use for tract A, the crescent piece north of the O'Brien Canal, is shown as park. No development is proposed on tract A as part of this project. Compatibility with the surrounding land uses. The majority of the surrounding uses to the south and to the west are existing industrial. The property to the north is the existing First Creek Dog Park, which aligns with tract A being dedicated as public. Impacts to public services. No negative impacts to public services, including water, sewer, stormwater, and streets, are anticipated as part of this project. Industrial developments typically are low water users and thus generate low sewer flows. Stormwater will comply with Commerce City and Mile High Flood District standards. A public improvement agreement is required and will include improvements to Havana Street. Impacts to public uses. There are no negative impacts to public uses, including parks, schools, and open space as part of this development. Dedicating Tract A to public zone enhances the existing First Creek Dog Park. Community compatibility. This proposed development is compatible with surrounding land uses. It benefits the community by removing undesirable uses from the Cass Transportation subdivision conditions. Finally, it's in the public's interest to remove these conditions as part of the Cass Transportation zoning. Rezoning to I-2 without conditions simplifies the development process and aligns with the comprehensive plan and future land use. And so the conclusion here, just summarizing all the points that we've made, it's compatible with surrounding land uses, does not negatively impact public services or public uses. It's compatible with the community and is in the public's interest. It removes cumbersome development restrictions and aligns with development standards and current code. For reference, here is a zoomed in version of our site plan showing a 3-lot development. Project rendering, this is something that Stacy had alluded to. This is the view looking across Highway 2 to the west. And at this time, if there are any other questions, we'll open up the floor.
Does anyone on council have any questions for staff or the applicant? Councilmember Hurst.
Good evening. Thanks for the presentation about this new potential development. Quick question is, you know, in terms of the land use, I was looking at the design, the original design, and then the picture, and it just looks, just asking for some clarification. Is it kind of meant for a single company? Because originally I thought when we were talking about this was an extension of Cass Transportation. And then looking at it, it looks like it's like warehousing. Is it meant for one company, or is it going to be multiple? Is it being designed for like multiple tenants?
I can clarify that the 4 lots that were under the original Cass Transportation subdivision and rezoning, that the 3 to the south have been retained by Cass Transportation, and this one is under separate ownership. So the proposal here is they're speculative buildings. I don't believe they have all of their users identified at this point, but they are separate from Cass.
I appreciate that. Thank you. There's no requirements for this, but I just would like to add a comment that, you know, as always, you probably won't find anybody else who supports trucking more, but we always want to try to solve truck parking issues on the front side. Greatest truck parking issues are generated at the origin and destination of trips. And so just hoping that any future development in our city can become a partner with us in helping solve those problems that we'll see in the future as more trucking development grows here.
Are there any other questions for staff or the applicant? Seeing none, I have one question. I do have a concern regarding the location and proximity to the Burlington Northern Railroad tracks there. Those trains going down there generate a lot of noise, and with the proximity of an almost 40-foot building pretty close to those railroad tracks would probably cause a lot of that noise to echo and reverberate back towards Eagle Creek, increasing the noise that those residents in that neighborhood have to face from train traffic. Will there be any sound deadening landscaping or any other materials applied on that berm in order to try to deaden some of that noise so it doesn't first hit the building and second bounce back towards the residents of Eagle Creek?
So, Mr. Mayor, we are proposing a 3-foot high perimeter berm on that the southeast corner of the property. In addition to that, there is extensive vegetation in that area, one for screening visually, but also to screen noise as well.
Okay, will that 3-foot berm be tall enough, given the fact that the railroad track and Highway 2 are both elevated compared to the elevation of the land in that area?
We've not done a noise study for this per se, but with the type of vegetation that we are proposing, it should be fairly effective in reducing the noise.
Okay, thank you for that. Mr. Deputy Clerk, will you please recognize Britt Plamberg, who is registered to speak on this matter?
Britt, you should be able to unmute yourself and begin providing your testimony.
Yes, good evening. Name is Britt Palmberg with Rick Engineering. We are representing Cass Transportation to the south of the applicant's property. Address of Cass 9850 Havana Street. The property owner just wanted to have some concerns about the drainage which may come from this property, this project onto their property to the south. But we understand from speaking with city staff, this will be addressed through the administrative review process of the site plan. But I just wanted to note this in the public record.
Thank you, sir, and I do apologize for mispronouncing your name.
No problem.
Mr. Deputy City Clerk, were there any other individuals registered to speak?
No other individuals registered to speak.
And did we receive any written comments on this matter?
No written comments were received by the deadline.
Thank you. One last time, does anyone on council have any questions for either the applicant or the staff before I close the hearing? Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case Z6169521. Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to approve the recommendation on motion Z61695-21.
Is that a motion and to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I have a motion and a motion to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission. Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to accept the findings and recommendations of the Planning Commission on case Z-616-95-21. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilmember Hurst.
We can discuss how I forgot to put my hand down. I apologize.
Seeing no request for discussion, we'll take a voice vote by show of hands. And looks like we are approved 8-0. Vote passes unanimously. At this time, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance Z-616-95-21. Councilmember Hurst.
I'd like to motion to approve on first reading by council as seated ordinance Z-616-95-21.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance Z-616-95-21. Is there any discussion on this item? Councilmember Hurst.
No, sir, sorry.
Seeing no request for discussion, will the Deputy City Clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance Z-616-95-21, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by removing zoning conditions on approximately 28 acres for the property at 9940 Havana Street to remain I-2 medium intensity industrial and to rezone approximately 1.87 acres of the property at 9940 Havana Street north of the O'Brien Canal from I-2 medium intensity industrial to public zone. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is ordinances on first reading. We have ordinance 2314, recognition of the Greater Outdoors Colorado Implementation Grant Funds. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff regarding this item? Councilmember Hurst.
I apologize, not a question, just wanted to show my support for this. This is something that I think, especially coming out of the pandemic, hopefully coming out of the pandemic, is going to be critical for our city. Trying to look it up real quick, but I know that they just rebranded the GoCo, and excited to kind of see it reinvigorated coming out of this pandemic, because again, I think it could be really good for our community moving forward.
Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2314. Councilmember Hurst.
Motion to approve ordinance on first reading 2314.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading ordinance 2314. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, will Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I just want to thank everyone on staff that made this possible. We have a lot of people that work on these grants tirelessly and make sure that Commerce City is represented and gets awarded these grants. So I just want to thank our team here on the staff.
Thank you. Will the Deputy City Clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2314, an ordinance amending the 2021 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Greater Outdoors Colorado Implementation Grant funds in the amount of $1,991,889 for the support of the programs, places, and pathways projects Go Wild and the authorization of the expenditures thereof. Councilmember Madera.
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Yes.
Councilmember Noble.
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst.
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Yes.
Councilmember Smith.
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
Passes 8-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda, ordinances on second reading. First ordinance is ordinance 2312, amendment to the Animal Code of the City of Commerce City. This ordinance was not approved unanimously and therefore was not placed on the consent agenda for approval on second reading. Does anyone on council have any questions for staff? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, I was one of them that didn't approve this, and for a couple of reasons. And not sure. It looks like he may be, but if Chief Nichols is still available, there's just a couple things that I keep going over in my head on this one, because this is a tough one on both. For if you're opposed or for it, it can be tough on both sides. Without being overly dramatic, I really just am worried about replacing one kind of unenforceable, I don't want to call it a bad law, but one unenforceable law with potentially another. And the reason I say that is because as you hear, we've heard some really, tragic and kind of scary stories. And as you hear those, I do try to work it out in my head, and I'm not a police officer, but how this new legislature, this new ordinance would change the ability to kind of enforce what's happening. And again, if it's only my opinion, if I'm out walking my dog and another dog comes and attacks us, whether they're with their owner or got away, without more witnesses coming forward, there's a lot of hearsay that goes into that, and it becomes a very tough situation and leaves a lot of frustrated individuals at the scene. And so really, Chief Nichols, if you don't mind, I wanted to get your opinion again on this, because I know this it doesn't seem to be an easy call to respond to. There's a lot going on. The perpetrator doesn't talk. There's a lot of different, variables to this one that makes me a little bit nervous. I want a safer community against people getting attacked by their dogs, but I struggle to really wrap my head around if we are making it safer by implementing this ordinance.
Thank you, Councilmember Hurst. Hopefully you can hear me. I didn't do a sound check before we got started. That's a great question. I can tell you there are a lot of particulars that go into determining whether a dog is vicious or not. This ordinance certainly does make it a little bit clearer. As you alluded to, there is we do need to deal with animals that don't speak English. And so determining what the motive is of another animal that may or may not have attacked it and the cause for it is always something that we are struggling with. At the end of the day, 99% of the time, we don't make everyone happy. This ordinance certainly does clarify some things for us and puts us in a better position to sort of use our due diligence to do our best effort forward. And I think it's pretty clear and convincing to residents that'll be taking a look at the ordinance that'll allow us to explain why we're taking the actions that we're taking. Without specific sort of incidents, that's sort of a roundabout way to give you an answer. I know it isn't the best answer, but I do believe that the ordinance does clarify a lot of things for the PD and making our ability to judiciously apply the ordinance across the board a little fairer for everyone.
Councilmember Hurst, you are muted.
I was going on and on. I apologize. Can't get my buttons right tonight. So I don't want to put you on the spot on the pit bull removal, but do you feel that the vicious dog or vicious animal, I apologize, the vicious animal really gives us more flexibility in terms of responding to these incidents? When you have one specific breed banned, obviously you're trying to stop that, but when we expand it to the direction that this is headed, do you feel like that gives your department and your officers better opportunity to maybe get these unsafe dogs off the street?
I'm not so certain it's a question of getting the unsafe dogs off the street. I will tell you as what my staff is concerned about is a pit bull breed is a pretty athletic and agile dog, and keeping it in a 4-foot enclosure, meaning the fence length up north, could be potentially problematic. We have animals that escape their enclosures all the time. For the most part, they are relatively mundane animals, very well-trained pets. They just get out and they want to run. The concern of me and my staff is if those pets are untrained pit bulls, that introduces a new level of concern that we need to be concerned about. But as it relates to the actual ordinance and the ability to remove vicious animals, this does strengthen it. And so we are grateful for that. But as long as we've had animals, they've found a way to jump fences.
Yeah.
And again, without any particular instances of what can be done better, again, the opinion of my staff and I, the 4-foot fences and a athletic dog that is not trained could potentially deal a lot more harm to somebody than somebody's Cocker Spaniel or German. I'm trying to think of a dog that generally speaking, that isn't going to be aggressive. So I know it's not the best answer. I don't have an opinion on whether the ordinance passes or not. Those are just the concerns that me and my staff talked about and how we're going to tackle those problems.
No, I appreciate it. The problem's bigger than this ordinance, right? I mean, the fences can definitely be an issue. I would hope that one would be responsible enough to consider dog breed when purchasing a house or purchasing a place for that dog to live. But that doesn't always happen. And quite honestly, people learn the hard way at times. And so that's why this one's been so tough for me, is that, of course, I feel for those that have been attacked in our community by vicious dogs. I just am worried about the unintended consequences. As you guys hear me say a lot of times, it's like, we're planning for this kind of North Star that's guiding us towards a better safety in terms of animals. And I agree, I've never been anywhere that people lose their dogs more. And my dog's gotten out a couple times as well. But what concerns me is, these situations that fit the bill where we can impound your dog, I guess you would say, take it to the pound. And it really it fits the law, but it really didn't fit the situation. And that's why I wasn't saying we had a bad law, but I'm worried about replacing one law that's tough and unenforceable with another. But I'm happy to hear you at least say you feel like it strengthens your guys' position, because I think that's the biggest thing is we can't go out and change every single dog owner that lives in Commerce City. You can't change their habits or their ways, and sometimes you can't change a dog. But what I'm most concerned about, I guess, is our role in that and how we can play a productive role in making this a safer community without immediately taking actions on some of the other issues that you addressed as well as a concern moving forward. So again, I'm on the fence about this one. I want to see it safer, but I also have a significant concern in the alternative. But this may be the best path forward. Thanks.
Councilmember Noble. Councilmember Noble.
Yes, sorry about that. My screen slid off. My screen slid off the side. Thank you very much. I have a couple of questions for Mr. Sheasley. Hello. I noticed in the ordinance that there was discussion of 6-foot fences, but in another part of the ordinance that was crossed off. And so I'm not sure whether, is there any requirement about 6-foot fences?
Yes. The prior definition of an enclosure related to a 6-foot fence, I believe, for a pit bull. Because we're switching to a model based on dangerous and vicious animals, which is something that's recommended by the International Municipal Lawyers Association, the definition of enclosure, let me just scroll up to it here, is a fenced or walled area having a fence or wall height of at least 6 feet or a lesser height if it has a permanent and securely attached roof. And so that's the definition of enclosure. There are some other components to it. If that enclosure is not permitted in a neighborhood for whatever reason, then that animal cannot reside in that neighborhood, is the end result. That limitation, so that word enclosure is used with regard to maintaining dangerous animals in the city. So once an animal is determined to be dangerous, it has to be confined in a house or another structure from which it can't escape, or be confined in an enclosure that is locked. And so that, and also has an impervious base, so it can't be tunneled out of. So that 6-foot fence requirement is maintained. What's not maintained is the minimum requirement that would apply to an animal on the basis of breed.
And could you remind us, in order to be declared a dangerous dog, how many incidents of biting are allowed?
So it's not, biting is not the term, but you can be determined to be, or an animal can be determined to be the dangerous animal if it attacks a person or another domestic animal, causing physical injury. Remember, physical injury is any contact resulting in pain or trauma of any kind, including bruising, muscle tears, broken bone, or skin laceration. Severe injury is a substantial risk of death, substantial risk of permanent disfigurement, protracted loss of impairment of the function of the body, et cetera. And so essentially a bite, excuse the need to over-define here. So one single attack causing injury on a person or animal, or, and I apologize, I'm not looking at the screen because I'm reading the document here. It behaved in a manner outside of the owner's property that a reasonable person would believe poses a serious and unjustified imminent threat of serious physical injury or death to a person or domestic animal. That's kind of threatening behavior or near attacks where it doesn't make contact, but it can then come before the court and be declared a dangerous animal. Otherwise exhibits a propensity, tendency, or disposition to attack, cause injury, or threaten the safety of persons or other animals without provocation, similar concept to the latter, or acted in a manner that causes or should cause its owner to know that it's potentially dangerous. So you actually don't need a bite to occur for an animal to be declared a dangerous animal.
And what can happen to a dangerous animal once that declaration occurs?
So a dangerous animal is then subject to automatic conditions that we're putting in place through this ordinance, which are conditions that would have been applicable to pit bulls that were allowed to remain in the city in 2005 when this was passed. I assume those dogs are no longer with us. And so we largely transferred those conditions over. And then so the dangerous animal is subject to limits, and that requires that confinement, as we talked about. It has to be registered with a photograph to the animal control agent on an annual basis. It has to wear some sort of identification that identifies it as a dangerous animal. There's an insurance requirement, requirements that the animal's owner notify the animal control agent of the dog getting loose, essentially, or causing an injury to someone, or if the animal dies or is sold. There is a limit on one dangerous animal per household, and then the animal control agents are permitted to inspect the animal at any point on the premises where they're kept. That's the mandatory conditions. The municipal court is also granted authority to come up with other conditions to fit a particular situation, which includes microchipping, spaying or neutering, limiting where the animal can be present, posting of signs on the property, requiring training for the animal or the owner, and then anything else that the court fashions to meet the specific situation.
And a vicious dog?
Yes. A vicious animal is defined as certainly more than a dangerous animal. It attacks a person or animal, causing death or serious injury, attacks a person or domestic animal on 2 or more occasions, causing physical injury, that lesser standard of injury, so essentially 2 bites, or is trained as a fighting animal or kept for the purposes of fighting. And vicious animals are prohibited from remaining in the city.
Okay, so a dangerous dog who could cause the same injuries that a vicious dog might, other than killing someone, could remain in the city, but a vicious dog who's done a dangerous dog who has now done it twice or has killed someone would have to leave the city, you're saying?
Yes, or potentially be put down, I believe, is another option within the court's discretion. It's kind of consistent throughout these laws. So yes, and that's why those conditions are imposed on dangerous animals that would reduce the chance that they do that in the future.
Now, I know that the city of Minneapolis has a map of dangerous dogs so that you know where you don't want to walk. You know where you don't want to move so that you don't bring your children next door or you don't walk by a dangerous area. That is not a portion of this ordinance, is it?
No, the ordinance is directed at regulating the animals and not necessarily that administrative function. Yes.
Do we have any requirement in if a dog is sold or returned to rescue or whatever the case might be, that its history of its dangerousness or viciousness goes with it, that has to be made publicly available?
That's not a component here. The ordinance in no way addresses really the sale of animals.
Does this ordinance in any way do anything to take into account what Chief Nichols was talking about, and that's the 4-foot, and some of our speakers, the 4-foot fence in some of the neighborhoods in the north of Commerce City?
There is no specific discussion of 4-foot fences or individual neighborhoods. I think that comes up in the context of any animal that is not yet determined to be a dangerous animal would just be subject to a 4-foot fence, whatever the owner has, or a lot of houses in the neighborhood don't have fences at all, for example, or they get out the front door. I think the standard prohibitions, what our laws do is prohibit conduct that doesn't necessarily prevent it. It creates consequences for it. And so we do have prohibitions against animals being at large. We have prohibitions against animal attacks. And now these consequences that if an animal is loose and either injures someone or threatens someone has these consequences that really previously didn't exist unless it was a pit bull, which would make it automatically prohibited.
Yes, and even though we have had a pit bull ban, there have been people who have pit bulls in Commerce City. I think it's my understanding that if their dog injured someone, their insurance would not cover it because it was already outlawed. I am, in speaking to, I'm reminded from Councilmember Hurst's comments that a woman who worked for me contacted me after I was living here for a while to ask if I knew whether Commerce City, or in particular, the Reunion area, had a pit bull ban because she and her husband had friends who lived in Reunion and they wanted to move here with their pit bull. And at that time, of course, there was a pit bull. So she decided to stay in Thornton, where they do have 6-foot fences that are solid, I might add. So it could be an invitation as well. I'm worried not about the second bite necessarily as much as I am about that first bite. Thank you.
Councilmember Madera.
Just a couple questions for Mr. Sheasley. I think you already opened one in terms of the fence, and I just want to remind people that, not everywhere in Commerce City has 4-foot fences. There are 6-foot fences down where I live. But I just want a little clarification of the intent of the law. It sounds like it's to remove the discriminatory nature of the previous ordinance that we had on the books, and really to expand that to consider more animals, dangerous animals than just pit bulls, right?
I will leave it, the policy question, to you all as to whether the ban itself was appropriate. It is difficult to enforce. Determining the nature of the dog is very difficult, and to prove that in court is difficult. And this ordinance does away with that restriction, which was the direction that we received from council to prepare, yes, based on, I think, the policy discussion at the time. The broader scope of dangerous and vicious animals, doing away with the focus on a breed, I believe makes it easier to enforce from both a prosecution perspective and likely from a law enforcement perspective.
Okay, and then my next question, we had someone during citizen communication that described the attack on their pets, and it wasn't necessarily a pit bull breed that attacked their dog. Had we had this ordinance in place, would those animals that attacked his animal be treated differently?
Councilman Madera, I'm going to assume that was a question for me, and that answer is a yes, they would have been.
And how would they have been treated differently?
According to the ordinance, we would have probably pursued dangerous animal at the ordinance regarding the dangerous animals, and we would have presented that before court, and then the judge would have made some ramifications as to what would have happened with the animal.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ellen Thomas.
Yes, thank you. I have a question also for Mr. Sheasley, regarding the ordinance. Is it, I don't think it's in there, but I want you to clarify, but could it be required for the owner to have an additional umbrella policy after the first offense, or even just from owning a vicious dog, and make it requirement for like $10,000 to $25,000 policy, you know, just like they have that policy to cover uninsured motorists?
I don't know about umbrella. We do, or if it would be necessary, on page 13, we do require for any dangerous animal that's allowed to remain in the city, that the owner maintain homeowners or renters liability insurance with at least $100,000 in coverage that would cover damage to persons or property caused by that animal. So without wading into what insurance is actually available, that is a condition. If they can't get that, then it is not something that would allow the animal to remain in the city.
Okay. But do you know, like, would staff monitor that, or who would make sure that, you know, that's being maintained and that they do have it?
So this adds significant burden to the animal control agent. The ordinance requires, along with that registration, that proof of insurance be provided to the animal control agent annually. And so presumably, if you fail to do that, the animal control agent would take action on that basis.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. Sheasley, will you remind me, is there a provision that speaks to animals acting in defense of an owner?
There are significant provisions related to that, if you'll bear with me a moment. Generally, an animal that has, well, let me find it before I speak, but yes, we don't, the point of this ordinance is also to make sure that both parties are treated fairly. And an animal that is accused of acting dangerously, but was doing so because another animal entered their property or attacked their owner or someone else. Yes, here I found it. It's subsection D to section 4-2010, which is on page 10 of the draft ordinance. In the exhibit, there's no violation of the section that prohibits animal attacks, etc. If the animal is for law enforcement, if at the time of the behavior or attack against a domestic animal, so an animal going after that animal that was attacked was at large and entered on the property. And some of these, by the way, are existing conditions within our law on animal attacks. At the time of the behavior or attack, the animal was biting the attacking animal or its owner, was biting or attacking the animal or its owner. If it attacks a person and the person was attempting to commit a criminal offense against the owner or their property of the attacking animal. So that specifically answers your question. Also, if someone tormented, provoked, abused, or inflicted injury on the attacking animal, then that is a defense. Or the animal entered into premises that were fenced or enclosed and the attacking animal, of that attacking animal. Or if the person was attempting to capture the animal or stop an animal fight, something like that. So someone sticks their hand into a dog or a cat fight and they are bitten. You don't necessarily want to have that occur. So I think those are largely, the changes to that section are really more definitional, but those sections previously existed.
Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Chief Nichols?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I am curious as to why, or let me phrase it another way. What exists today that would prevent an animal control officer from taking steps that some of our resident speakers have brought forward? what prevented them from doing anything that this ordinance now enables them to do?
There is a lot of ambiguity with regards to an animal that is a pit bull or deemed aggressive. As the city attorney just laid out, there are a variety of reasons why dogs bite and or attack, and it is up to a animal control agent to make that determination as they're on the scene, taking a look at all the factors that were present. This law, quite frankly, puts them into two different categories: the actions of a dangerous animal and the actions of a vicious animal, and those are very compartmentalized. So we don't have to worry about the breed or the type of animal that it is or we're simply going on the behavior that the animal exhibited when the attack occurred. And that is a very clear definition for the animal control agents, if that answers your question.
It does to a degree, but I would think that ignoring what breed it is, you would have sufficient information to be able to determine whether it was a dangerous or a vicious dog. We've certainly gotten pictures of some of these, and it would have made it easier. I know in the case of a woman who spoke to us a month or two ago and then also sent us an email and pictures today, they were on their front stoop as they were getting ready to go for a walk when the dog ran up on their stoop. Mr. Strock, who spoke earlier, has a tiny dog. Mrs. Sanchez, who spoke earlier, has a tiny dog. I happen to be familiar with these because these are in Ward 4. And while there may be some council members who don't see any difference or don't find it in their hearts to be as concerned about this issue regarding fences as I am, that's up to them. But I think the incidents that have come forward to me over this summer have been very frightening and very disturbing to the residents. And the fact that nothing was done, or presumably wasn't done, doesn't make me confident that there will be anything that will be done in the future necessarily, because whether or not it had to do with a pit bull, and in one case it did, it's irrelevant. The dogs were still injured. Perhaps it's an issue of the people weren't injured and just the pets were. Is that what the change is? We did make, I think that is in this ordinance. It wasn't in that didn't exist before. Is that part of it? Or am I mistaking that?
No, ma'am, that is absolutely something that this new ordinance addresses. And without getting into the specifics of cases that are going to be appearing before the judge, it was a judgment call for the animal control agent to determine the reason for the attack or alleged attack and the sort of motive for it. And again, I believe as Councilmember Hurst eloquently mentioned, sometimes that's extremely difficult to make a determination. And from the public safety standpoint, a dog is someone's property, and there is a very high burden of proof before we take someone's property for them. This ordinance addresses that.
Okay, thank you very much. And
yes, ma'am.
Mr. Sheasley? Why is it that we can't have higher fines for these? It does seem preposterous that a dog could cause that much damage to a small dog, and the maximum fine was $133.
So thank you for asking that question. I did want to raise that to the council. Municipal offenses that are criminal, which most of these are subject to a state law maximum cap, which is $2,650, I think, adjusted for inflation. So I think that goes up by $3,000 at this point, based on when that was set, somewhere over 3,000. Penalties within that range are, unless the council sets a specific minimum, are subject to the discretion of the municipal court. And so as my understanding, the municipal court has established a schedule of fines for certain offenses and then catch-all fines. That is something that I've recommended we revisit, and I think others want to revisit it, where the parking component or traffic components that we discussed previously, I determined are also through that schedule. And so those are things that are set within the court's discretion. Now, in other cases, the council, for example, fireworks has set mandatory minimum fines for certain violations. And council could do that here. If you were to do that, I'd recommend you do it through a separate ordinance after consulting with the municipal court. I do know that he would appreciate that. As to the restitution question that came up earlier, I have learned, that's my understanding, that the court believes that or has made the determination that any restitution through the municipal court is also subject to that state law cap or should be treated the same as that. There may be wiggle room around that. I don't know the court's basis for doing that as well. I know that there's the ability of the court to collect on restitution awards given our administrative staff, and limited tools makes pursuing restitution through municipal court not a favorable option.
What's a better option then?
So yes, so civil remedies are always available. I do understand that imposes a cost on people to obtain an attorney and pursue remedies in that way against a homeowner's insurance typically.
And would we be able to raise the maximum or ask the judge to raise the maximum in municipal court?
You could you could not raise them. Well, you could set a mandatory minimum essentially, or range within the state law maximum. So up to that, somewhere around $3,000 limit. Council could pass an ordinance, much like council did with fireworks a few years ago, saying that for any violation of this section, the mandatory fine is at least X, and then there's no discretion, or allow the court to lower it in his discretion.
Okay, thank you very much. It is very traumatic for people. And we're talking about people who are dog owners also, who have been traumatized by these incidents. So it's this, as it does on Mr. Hurst, it weighs on me very heavily. So thank you very much.
Are there any other questions for staff at this time? Seeing none, Mr. Deputy City Clerk, were there any written comments received regarding this ordinance?
Mayor Huseman, no written comments were received by the deadline.
Thank you very much. Are there any council members that wish to introduce any amendments to the ordinance as introduced?
Mayor, if I may, I think there was, for the Deputy City Clerk, there was a written comment that it's in the packet. I think under written comments from the Best Friends Animal Society.
Robert, you are correct. Sorry about that, council.
Okay. No worries.
Okay, so there was a letter received from the Best Friends Animal Society in favor of us repealing, or in favor of us passing this ordinance and repealing the breed-specific language. Are there any council members that wish to introduce any amendments to the ordinance as introduced? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve on second reading and final reading ordinance 2315. Councilmember Madera.
Move to approve ordinance 2315.
I have a motion to approve on second and final reading ordinance 2315. Councilmember Wadiola.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading ordinance 2315. Is there any discussion?
Mayor Huseman, I just want to clarify if this is the animal code breed specific regulations ordinance. This is 2312.
My apologies. I correct that ordinance 2312. Sorry, I'm reading a little bit further down on my screen there. I have a motion and a second to approve on final reading ordinance 2312. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, thank you. I just have one quick question for Roger. And Roger, I'm simply going to ask, if possible, the other day, you kind of gave us, last time we had this discussion, you kind of gave us a brief background on why there's 4-foot split rail fences on the, I don't know the best way to describe the outside properties in some of the northern side of the community. And I guess I'm looking for clarification that the city is not preventing metropolitan districts or HOAs from changing those split rail fence guidelines to give somebody the option to add a 6-foot fence to comply with the enclosure rule if they need to. They're not going to be either forced to move or give up their dog if they have a dangerous animal but not a vicious one.
That was a standard put in place by the development, as I understand it, and I would defer to Director Rogers, who has more information about that.
Perfect. Thank you, sir.
Mayor, City Council, Happy New Year, by the way. Great question, Council Member. So as it relates to the development process, fence requirements and standards are, I would say, dynamic across the various developments. We have some that will have self-limiting factors as part of their approval process to no taller than 3.5, 4 feet in height. That may be prescribed by the developer at the time. We may have a standard subdivision, which under our pricing land development code is allowed to go up to 6 feet. However, an HOA and or a authoritative district, such as a metro district, may have covenants and restrictions that further limit above and beyond what is the requirements of the city to a lower height standard and fencing requirement. So when we are dealing with that, obviously with relation to this code or to this code and ordinance amendment, I would have to rely on Robert's interpretation of what takes precedent with what we already have established under the land development code. And then ultimately at the same time, what an HOA or metropolitan district may establish above and beyond what we are permitted or what we have permitted by right.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're clarifying that if we could get that answer before the vote, because there was a semi-significant conversation that happened on social media within the last day or two. And there were some, hey, we took this to our HOA and we got it changed. Now we have 5.5 feet or something along those lines. And that seems simple enough, but I will say the question for me comes from an understanding of how metro districts works. In a sense, the metro district that I currently live in owns all of the perimeter fencing. So because of their ownership, do they have the ability to replace it with the 6-foot fence? There's a lot of what I'm trying to see is if that metro district or HOA came to an agreement that they would start allowing those fences that are currently split rail 4-foot fences to remove and reinstall to code a 6-foot fence, the city will not get in the way of them doing that, as long as they do kind of follow their own democratic process to come to that conclusion.
I would say, sir, that staff would provide a level of review to ensure consistency amongst the fencing that we have along the perimeter. And we would conduct that review as part of our standard process, in which then the metro district or HOA, whoever may once again be that final owner of said fence, to bring that through our process. So there would still be some, at least, review that we perform and to ensure that we have consistency across that perimeter from an aesthetics and to once again make sure that we're getting to the practical importance of, once again, that aesthetic appeal of the public realm and the private realm as they meet with that fence.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I just wanted to make sure we had that discussion because, if we're talking about, some of these challenges that homeowners who are trying to be responsible need to address, I really don't want it to be us that's putting that limiting factor on them. I am always in support of extremely localized government like a metro district or because you can make these decisions in a smaller community setting. But if 80% of your community voted and the city shut it down, that would be something else we would have to deal with, I'm assuming. And so just wanted to make sure that discussion happened before we vote on this, so our citizens can understand that the original intention of that fence that we were told is to keep a farm type atmosphere or layout because of the history of the North Range. But now it seems, as we've lived through 20 years of this, there may be some better solutions on the horizon. I don't want us to be in the way of that.
Right. And I would just want to share this as well, because it did just come to my mind. There is an exception within our land development code that does state when we have properties that are backing up to identified open space, that we have a fence no taller than 4 feet. So when we're talking about in probably more of the generalities of where we have fences that are backing up along sidewalks, streets, things of that nature, and turn onto each other properties, I don't foresee that as an issue. It's once again, when we're talking about this one exception adjacent to open space where we do have that land development code requirement of 4 feet. So I did want to put that out on the record for you all as well.
Yeah, and I just so I wasn't trying to contest any of that. I just wanted to make sure that was on record because there has been some confusion. I want to make sure. So to me, just for clarifying, it sounds like if that community made that decision, they can go through the city's process to get that approved. And really what the city's looking for there is just purely on aesthetics and making sure we have consistency.
That is correct, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Councilmember Madera.
So I struggled with this a lot at first too, because I was so ultra focused on the breed specific ban that, I kind of didn't take a step back at first to look at the whole thing. But, the more that I look at it is it's providing broader protections. And, a lot of the stories that we hear are not pit bulls. And so the complaints that we're getting about these dogs not being punished adequately is because of the lack of ordinance that we have in place. And I think, putting this ordinance in place really kind of does two things. It removes the discrimination from the ordinance that we have right now and gives all dogs a fair chance, right, to prove that they're good dogs and, until proven otherwise. And then for the dogs that have already proved otherwise, it punishes those dogs regardless of their breed, color, or what have you. Because when I was campaigning for city council, there's so many dogs that, got out, and usually it's a screen door, and these dogs are pretty smart and know how to open them. And, I had big boxers charging at me and turned out to be the sweetest pup. And then sometimes you get these little dogs that are just vicious and chase you all the way out of the yard, when you're knocking on doors. So, I just, I hope that council's supportive of this because it really does two things. And I think it does make our ordinances better and our ability to enforce these ordinances better. And, it gives people the choice of having whatever pet they want regardless. We're not in charge of that. I don't have any pets, so, I don't have any skin in the game in that sense. But, I think it's long overdue, and we're seeing in a lot of other communities that these bans are a little bit archaic.
Councilmember Wadiola.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, and I just wanted to really put it out there, though, also is that this is just one step. I think we have to revisit the fines and see what we could do for the residents out there. So I'm in favor of it for many of the reasons that most of the colleagues are. But I think this is the first step for me, and see if we could raise the fines and just make this a better ordinance. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
Thanks very much. I would like to go back to Mr. Rogers for a minute on this. Thank you very much. Yes, thank you. I actually took advantage of a recent meeting that I had with developers for Oakwood Homes in Reunion to ask them this question because of my concerns about the 4-foot fence. And since, pit bulls are banned, we of course don't have incidents usually involving them, although we did. But typically that wouldn't be the case. That might change if people move here. Now, what I was told in having this conversation with them, first of all, they weren't aware that we were contemplating this ordinance. Second of all, they said that it wasn't strictly CCNR, that it was in the building code now of Commerce City. And I'm not hearing you say that. So if it could be changed, my feeling is that if the fences could be higher, I mean, I don't see why we have to go the expense of making a 6-foot fence when we don't own a dog. But, you know, how do you get around one neighbor to another? Is that aesthetics, or are you only talking about the perimeter?
I'm going to try to break out your question, ma'am, to answer the questions that you have there. I think in regards to your first question about reunion specifically and the permits and what was shared with you, ma'am, I would say we don't have it specifically in the International Building Code. We do have it as a requirement of a permit. And I would say that it's located within our reunion PUD permit that governs various filings. So with respect to that, if reunion and who is the underlying property owner of said fence, that being the HOA or the Metro District, or who those responsibilities have been shifted to, that would be the responsible party in having to amend their PUD permit in order to make that adjustment of up to 6 feet. With respect to fencing, for us from a city perspective, is more about the consistent aesthetics along property lines for various lengths, depending upon how we have various blocks, street lengths, and things of that nature that all play into a stitched in community with the broader neighborhood. From that perspective, but when we look at it from the code perspective, right, we give the flexibility when we're going through the development process with the developer to make that determination about the aesthetics that they're trying to achieve for their community. Like I said, some maybe in the core historic city may not have a requirement within their subdivision to allow the maximum flexibility for property owners for privacy and other purposes. While certain master developments up in the northern range may have a varying degree, like I said, with having that 4-foot adjacent to the open space, or having a 6-foot and a 5-foot more interior to lots for privacy, just because of its proximity from home to home. So it's very much driven when we're coming through our process by the developer and what aesthetic they're trying to sell to the future resident that will be living within that development, living within that neighborhood.
So it is a requirement of a permit then? A building permit?
A building permit, yes, ma'am. We have what is called a typical fence permit, but we also have identification of, for once again, not in all cases, but in some, in our plan unit development permit, which is associated with a zoning action. We do have a requirement that outlines the design of those fences that will be submitted for and then processed.
Thanks very much for clarifying. Oh, I'm sorry, Roger, please.
That's quite all right. Just to clarify, what we are enforcing is the PUD standard. It's not a city law. And so if they change their PUD, we would enforce to that amended PUD at that point.
Who would change the PUD? Is that the Metro District or the developer?
So in this instance, and I'm just going to use reunion as an example. In reunion, the Metro District has the authority. The Metro District and the HOA have a shared authority with being able to process amendments to the PUD permit for said, because it falls on land that is governed by them. And I would say to Roger's point, that are non-PUDs, we will rely on the land development code requirements that are allowed up to 6 feet for residential property.
And what about retroactively? I mean, it's one thing if we're talking about a new development, but it's quite another when there's 1,000 homes here now.
Just to make sure that I understand, what do you mean by retroactive? Make sure that I'm answering your question, ma'am.
Oh, that we put in this ordinance and then fences that have already been erected can now be changed if the PUD is changed, or is it changed to the PUD only for the future?
I am going to try to make sure that I answer this correctly. And Robert, I may need your assistance on making sure that I am referencing back to how we would apply this, but with any change to the PUD that would correspond to this request, we would be able to effectuate. Once again, the law in and of itself, and once again, I'm looking to the city attorney to kick me underneath the table if I misspeak here, that if this requirement goes into place and the PUD has not been amended to adjust that, the PUD is still in a force in effect.
Let me try and state it another way. I don't know if this will answer it. This ordinance doesn't do anything about fence heights anywhere. And first off, and I don't think that's what you're saying, but I just want to make sure everybody understands that. If you're thinking retroactive as in an existing PUD, your neighborhood in Reunion where there is zoning and it's all built out, that PUD can be amended. And if that fence height restriction is within that PUD, or that portion of that PUD, I don't have the specific code section in front of me, but lots of different people can initiate PUD amendments, including the city on its own initiative. Property owners within the PUD can do it, but I'd need to check and see how many people are required to consent to that. Or if anyone can initiate a PUD zoning amendment. Like you could come in possibly, Councilmember Noble, as a property owner and apply for a PUD amendment for the particular PUD that you're in, I think. But there's lots of stuff around that. The metro districts and HOAs don't, I think, have any special authority other than as property owners within that PUD. And I think that's what Jason was referring to as far as ownership, as control. So they're just the same as any other property owner.
And to further Robert's points, ma'am, I would say most of our PUD zonings are devoid of any discussion around fence. It's typically left at that development permit stage where we have more information about lot layout, building siting, roadways, open space, for us then to be able to make certain determinations that they are in compliance with certain land development code requirements, such as the 4 feet adjacent to open space. Like I said, it's at that time you can be further restrictive on how tall you want a fence to go or not at that permit stage.
Thank you all very much.
My pleasure.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, will the Deputy City Clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2312, an ordinance amending Chapter 4 of the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code, commonly known as the Animal Code, to remove breed-specific regulations and address dangerous and vicious animals, to amend animal disturbances regulations, to amend procedures relating to animal impoundment and disposition, and to amend other provisions relating to the regulation of animals in the City of Commerce City. Councilmember Madera?
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas?
Yes.
Councilmember Noble?
No.
Councilmember Guardiola?
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes?
Yes.
Councilmember Smith?
Yes.
Mayor Huseman?
Yes.
Passes 7-1.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is ordinance 2315, amending the City Revised Municipal Code and further amending the Model Traffic Code. This order was not approved unanimously and therefore was not placed on the consent agenda for approval on second reading. Is there anyone on council who has any questions for staff regarding this ordinance? Seeing none, do any council members wish to introduce any amendments to the ordinance as introduced? Councilmember Grimes.
Sorry, Mayor, I do have one question. Can we back up to that phase? I'm just curious where we landed on work trucks versus regular trucks. That was a huge point of discussion last time, and I'm not quite sure where we landed.
Work trucks and regular trucks, Councilmember Grimes, have not landed yet. They are, I believe, on this. They are not in this ordinance. Restrictions on RVs and parkings of those trucks are not in this. Where I believe the study session this coming Monday, we're gonna have that fun again.
Are there any other questions? Are there any council members that wish to introduce an amendment to the ordinance as introduced? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading ordinance 2315. Councilmember Madera,
Move to approve ordinance 2315.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading ordinance 2315. Is there any discussion? Councilmember. Seeing no request for discussion, will the deputy city clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2315, an ordinance amending the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code and further amending the Model Traffic Code to regulate the parking of vehicles in residential areas and abandonment and towing of vehicles. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola.
Oh, you missed
Nope,
one.
I'm so sorry, Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
Yes,
passes 8-0.
thank you. Next on the agenda is case Z-966-21, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the city of Commerce City. This ordinance was not approved unanimously due to my abstention and therefore was not placed on the consent agenda for approval on second reading. This time I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading ordinance Z-966-21. Councilmember Madera,
Move to approve case Z-966-21.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading ordinance Z-966-21. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the deputy city clerk to read the title and take a roll call vote.
Ordinance Z-966-21, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the city of Commerce City, Colorado by rezoning the property at 7190 Colorado Boulevard from public to planned unit development and approving a PUD zone document. Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman,
I abstain.
passes 7-0.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is administrative council business. First item of business and administrative council business is a Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment Suncor Commerce City Refinery Title V permit letter. This time I'd like to invite interim city manager Roger Tinklenberg to make introductory remarks.
Thank you, Mayor. Just wanted to let you know, Council, that what we tried to achieve with this letter is just a very overview statement of concern. There will be later opportunities for presenting technical information and really more firm information. With that, I would like to turn it over to Director Rogers.
Thank you, Interim City Manager. Once again, good evening, Council. Want to be able to just kind of, go back to what Dominic alluded earlier tonight, just for the benefit of our residents who are watching at home. CDPHE, or Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment, will be holding an informal listening session this Thursday, January 7th, 2021. This session is intended to be a broader discussion regarding the facility's permit and process, while a more robust opportunity will be available for us and for the community at large on or shortly after January 15, 2021, to be able to provide comment on the process that is specific to the technical details within that Title V permit. The Title V permit is an operating permit that consolidates all existing air quality control and permit requirements that apply to Plant 2 equipment into one comprehensive, legally enforceable document. The Title V permit, as we understand it, that we're discussing the submittal of this letter and prior to opening of the formal process, and that will ultimately be under formal review, only governs the operations of Plant 2. Plant 1 and 3 are governed under a separate Title V permit. CDPHE has noted it to us, but it also has provided information, I believe, to the broader community that it does not anticipate that the Plant 1 and the Plant 3 permits will be considered for public comment until 2022. So with the opportunity that we have before us, we have not only this Title V permit to provide commentation, but we will have ultimately additional opportunities to provide commentation on the other plants once that becomes more readily available as far as information for us to provide. Which has led us to this point, what I would say that council requested staff at the last regular meeting in December, December 21st, to prepare a letter to put on record and to express the city's perspective on general well-being, transparency of information on operations, and an opportunity for continued dialogue throughout this process in regards to that permit. The letter that is attached to tonight's item for your review, staff believes we've met the intent of that direction. As Roger said, I would further offer that this is one of many opportunities, and I suspect many of opportunities that will be before us as a city, as an organization to weigh in on in the process between formal comments that we can submit, as Dominic has stated, on and after January 15 of this year, potential public hearings that may occur on this matter, and obviously direct correspondence that we have, not just between our staff and CDPHE staff over the next 3 to 6 months. There are a couple of things I would like to note just so that you're aware. We do note that there are some minor discrepancies as it relates to dates within the letter that will be cleaned up. The letter references 2020, obviously we're in 2021. So we'll clean those up before anything of that letter is sent. But with that, obviously staff is available for any questions, and obviously we look forward to your feedback and or support to be able to submit the letter to CDPHE.
Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rogers, and I support the letter. I appreciate it. When I brought this idea forward, it was important for us to be taking a stand, as was pointed out earlier by one of our speakers. This is something that Commerce City hasn't done in all the decades of Suncor's permit review. So I appreciate that it didn't go into great detail or technical detail, and that is perfectly fine. And I did notice a couple of things in the letter that needed a little attention, so I'm glad that you're going to be taking another whack at it. It doesn't affect the content, just other things. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate that you drafted this letter. Thank you.
Our pleasure.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jason, as well. I am generally supportive of the letter. However, I'd like to ask Council if we could entertain striking or adjusting the language related to transparency. I think the way it's written insinuates that there's an intentional lack of transparency, and I haven't experienced that since being on council, having regular updates from management at Suncor. And they're reporting, whether or not we like what's being reported, the reporting is happening with regards to exceedances and such. And so I'd like to suggest that we strike the language related specifically to transparency.
Is that a motion that you're making?
I would make a motion to strike language related to transparency.
Councilmember Noble, did you want to second that motion, or do you have something to say outside of that? You're on mute.
I'm not using my regular system tonight. I I did not wish to second it. I
Please
did
stand
wish
by.
to say something, so I won't say anything else.
Please, Councilmember Madera.
I'll second that motion.
I have a motion and a second on the proposed letter to strike any language related to the lack of transparency. Is there any discussion on that? Councilmember Noble?
Yes, my concern would be about the hours that it occasionally takes whenever there is an emission that needs to be reported, and we're not notified until 2.5, 3 hours after it occurred. So I'm not certain. I would say that transparency has certainly been the case since June, when they began giving us a report after we made a unanimous motion in December. So I am satisfied with the language as it stands in the letter.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I think I'm in the middle on that one. I think, of course, I think I'd promote more transparency, and I hear Councilwoman Grimes to insinuate that they're not at least being transparent may be incorrect, because they don't have to do further reporting than report to CDPHE. So I agree with that statement. They're doing as they are required. I think what this request, what I would ask is that this request shows our continued will to continue to build that relationship so we can have more immediate and open transparency beyond what they're required from a CDPHE level, from the state and federal level. And continuing to work with us to find ways where we can connect our system with theirs, whether it's reverse 911, whether it's using a city system to reach out in a more immediate way. Of course, that's what I think the intent for me in terms of transparency is about, is to keep advocating for a system that makes more sense for our citizens, especially in that area. Maybe not even just our citizens, just the general area. If that includes parts of Denver, so be it. I just think I agree with the transparency and clarifying the intent, but I would like to continue to advocate for education and transparency to continue through continued and improved relations, whether that's software sharing or whatnot, is yet to be seen.
Mr. Tinklenberg?
I was wondering if we inserted the word past, if that would satisfy kind of both perspectives. In other words, it would be and a past lack of transparency.
Councilwoman Grimes, maybe if you could chime in, but from my perspective, I think that would. It is my feeling that this is not going to be the last time we discuss this specific letter or topic with Suncor. And so I think we will have time to further clarify our intent and continue to work on building that relationship for more immediate transparency moving forward.
I would be open to changing the language to continued communication, improved communication, something along that line. Transparency, in my mind, kind of implies a negative connotation. And so I agree with, connecting more systems and getting more communication out and more things to residents. I'm all for that. I don't like the implicit nature of the word transparency as it's being used here.
Councilmember Madera?
I think transparency is a little bit of a tricky thing because it depends on the perspective that you're looking at it from. There's certain reporting requirements that Suncor has to go through, and one of those reporting requirements is to the CDPHEs. So, if we're putting here that they're not being transparent, but CDPHE's experience has been otherwise because all their information is up on the state's website, which is where Councilwoman Noble gets it from, if I'm not mistaken. So that to me is transparency, and they're doing the reporting that they're required to do. I think sometimes their timeliness can be questionable, but you have to think about where we are in the ranking of the hierarchies, right? They they have federal regulators, they have state regulators, and then it kind of flows down until they get to us. So I think I prefer the more generic, just talking about at the same time the refinery's operations have not only affected the long-term health and well-being of city residents, but the trust of the community. I think that gets more to the point, and instead of nitpicking little things, we're going to have time to discuss these things with the CDPHE as the process evolves. So rather than going back and forth over one word, I say we keep it generic, because it really is the operations in general, right? That's affecting the health of the community and the trust of the community, and it's those lapses that they have in their operations that has caused the trust. I know transparency is also an issue, but it's more of an issue of ease of access and knowing where to find it. Because if you don't know where to find it, it can be difficult to access. So I do agree in that sense that transparency can be better. But for the purposes of this letter, I say we keep it more generic.
If I may, Mayor and Council Member, maybe this is maybe a way to kind of split the baby. I'm hearing transparency, I'm hearing improved communication, and maybe that's maybe the more appropriate way of looking at that as far as the refinery's operations and a lack of transparency. Maybe it's been the lack of clear communication over time. I know I've heard that from council in a number of different conversations around the table about clear communication is always key for us to be able to communicate to our community about what we understand, and we've heard that from the community as well. Just to put that offer on table, if that's a better structuring of that sentence or the portion of that sentence about clear communication over the past or in the past, something to that sense, keeping it generic, but just wanted to put that out there.
I'm open to that, and I don't know if I need to make an amendment to do that, but definitely like that line of thought, Jason.
So I don't have a problem with the transparency comments in there. I think it's very easy to get stuck in the mindset of the events that have happened over the last year. Let's remember that the Suncor purchased the refinery a decade and a half ago. There have been countless incidents since they purchased that refinery. There have been countless incidents where the community was not made aware of threats to their health and safety. The benzene being discovered in Sand Creek is one such example. How long did we know that benzene was in Sand Creek before it was announced and cleanup efforts began? So there's a lot of questions regarding transparency from that organization since they purchased the refinery in the early 2000s, and I have no problem with that statement remaining within the letter that we send to CDPHE. Councilmember Hurst.
I think valid point. But to add to that, Mayor Huseman, maybe we should add to CDPHE as well. Like, hey, why weren't you more transparent? If you're getting reporting, you have reporting requirements. Why isn't there something that the state's requiring for immediate residents in the area set to a certain standard? In no way trying to shift blame away from Suncor, but in the reporting of the report out process, they're the ones that have set requirements with the EPA, and they're basically acting as the EPA arm in this situation. That may be something we look at is like, hey, if we're just a voice in this, we really have limited authority in the outcome. Maybe we should be advocating for CDPHE to take a closer look at the reporting requirements and standards that they have on the Suncor, because it's the only refinery in the state. They can focus on that and try to find ways and systems to better require them to be more immediate with their response to some of these issues. And we've heard what they're trying to do in that say hour that it's taken. They're trying to analyze what it is and make the right decisions moving forward. But again, with better equipment and quicker response time, that could be valuable to the citizens that live in the area.
Thank you. So right now we have a motion and a second to strike the transparency language from the letter. Mr. Rogers.
I just wanted to be able to provide for all of council and to Councilmember Hurst's comments. If you look into the third paragraph of the letter, we do speak about the opportunity that CDPHE has before it to look at improved monitoring, record keeping, and obviously reporting on sources of air pollution emissions, and that we think they have a really great opportunity for paradigm shifting, I'll say decision driving and driving the decision making with this permit. So right, we're calling them to continue to engage us to work on how we can improve along those three kind of highlighted items that we've addressed with, like I said, monitoring, record keeping, and reporting on the matters. So just wanted to make sure that that was clear within the letter that we are asking for that sensitive thought process in that permit process to those matters.
Thanks, sir. So for clarification, if you vote yes, you are voting to remove the transparency language from the letter. A no vote would be to keep it. Will the deputy city clerk please take a roll call vote?
Mayor, isn't there an opportunity to amend the motion?
If you would like to amend the motion, you may.
You're on mute, Councilwoman Grimes.
Thank you, Councilmember Guardiola. Yeah, I would like to make an amendment to the motion to switch from striking the language to adjusting the language to speak to improved communication at a more general level, like Councilmember Madera suggested.
Would that involve removing the word transparency?
It would.
Okay. Councilmember Madera, you seconded that motion. Are you in favor of the amendment?
I'm agreeable to the amendment.
All right, so I have a motion and a second to strike the word transparency from the letter and add communication to the letter. Again, will the deputy city clerk please take a roll call vote?
Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
No.
Councilmember Noble,
No.
Councilmember Guardiola,
No.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
Yes.
Councilmember Smith,
No.
Mayor Huseman.
No.
I have 1, 2, 3 in favor and 5 opposed. Motion fails.
Okay, at this time, I'm looking for a motion and a second to authorize this letter to be signed. Mr. Rogers, before we get to that,
Yes, sir.
you had your hand up?
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't put it down. Sorry.
Got it. Okay, so again, I'm
Sorry, Mayor.
Yes.
I think Mr. Rogers may have been thinking to ask who would be signing the letter. I don't know if that was discussed earlier. I think the intent is for this to come from staff. So I don't know if, Jason, if that's correct. And so a motion's not really required necessarily, but council can endorse it for sure.
I actually have a second motion that I'd like to make on the signatures of that after we get through the approval of the letter. So Councilmember Noble.
Yes, I move to approve the letter as written.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the letter as written. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Noble.
No discussion.
All right, we will take will the deputy city clerk please take a roll call vote?
Councilmember Madera,
Yes.
Councilmember Alan Thomas,
Yes.
Councilmember Noble,
Yes.
Councilmember Guardiola,
Yes.
Councilmember Hurst,
Yes.
Councilmember Grimes,
No.
Councilmember Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Huseman.
Yes.
That passes 7-1.
Thank you. At this time, I'd like to make a motion that the letter, we don't traditionally do this, be signed by all council members who wish to sign their name onto it, rather than just have this with my signature on it or a staff member's signature on it. I think it would be more impactful to have council members specifically sign on to that. If you are not in agreement of the letter, then you would have the right to not sign on to it. So that is my motion to allow all of us to individually make that decision, yes or no, to sign on to it. Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
Thank you. I have a motion and a second to allow each individual council member that chooses to sign on to this letter before it is sent to CDPHE. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Madera.
Just have a question, being that the heading says community development department. Is there any implication to having all council sign it as opposed to staff?
I don't think there is. We could reprint it on I don't recall if we have city council letterhead, but at a minimum, we could put it on city manager letterhead if you wanted to do, something more generic.
I guess just a follow-up question, why was this coming from staff in the first place?
We weren't sure who was supposed to sign it, so we just drafted it generically.
Okay, sounds good.
Is there any other discussion on this motion? Seeing none, we can do a voice vote on this one. Please use your physical hands if you wish to agree to all council members agreeing to sign on to it, to putting their signature on there. And it looks like I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 in favor, and Councilmember Grimes is opposed to that motion. So I do not know if you all have sent in an electronic signature for the staff to be able to put onto a document. If you have not, please take a white piece of paper with black ink, sign your name, and you take a picture of it or scan it and send that into Annette so that she can affix your digital signature to the item. Everybody understand that one? And if you choose not to participate in the letter, then no need for you to follow that. Councilmember Hurst, you have your hand up.
I was just going to suggest that we all sign it because that's the voice of the council. We put our public comments of any opposition forward in public, and now together as a council, I feel like we should sign it because that's what the council decided. So that was just my suggestion. No, I got it in there late, but if that's parting words on everybody thinking about that, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is the Great Outdoors Colorado Resilient Communities Grant Support Letter. I'd like to invite Parks, Recreation, and Golf Director Carolyn Keith to lead the discussion.
Carolyn, you should be able to unmute yourself whenever you're ready.
Honorable Mayor, members of City Council, I'm here tonight to talk to you about, well, actually request your support for the mayor to sign on behalf of City Council a letter of support for our upcoming GOCO Resilient Communities Grant. Just a brief history. You may recall we applied for this grant in November when the grants were reviewed by the GOCO board. Our submission was not approved. However, in following up with GOCO staff, we were encouraged to apply in this round coming up in February. And the feedback we got regarding our grant was, we thought we were clear that the city was supportive of the park ranger program and the idea of sustaining that program. GOCO board members didn't read that into our application. So this time around, we would like to, while we don't usually ask for letters of support for grants from City Council, we feel this will help us demonstrate that our city is committed to this program long-term and sustaining of that program. And just as a matter of information, the grant request would cover some of the initial costs in setting up that program with Adams County Open Space, and would also help in funding the actual park ranger position for at least the next year. There certainly aren't any guarantees. We were just encouraged to reapply, and it was shared with us that they just wanted to confirm our support for the program. I couldn't think of a better way. You all have already indicated your support for park ranger programs and community navigator in our community. So we're simply endorsing that through a letter signed by the mayor. If there are no other questions at all, That's all I have.
Are there any
Receiving.
questions for staff regarding this item? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to authorize me to sign the Great Outdoors Colorado Resilient Communities Grant Letter in support of, on behalf of the City Council. Councilmember Madera,
So move.
Councilmember Alan Thomas.
I second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to authorize my signature on the letter. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, we'll take a voice vote. So please use your hands in the physical window so your vote can be counted. 1, 2, 3. Looks like that's going to pass unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any council members have any administrative council business? Councilmember Noble.
Thank you very much. I have a couple of things. First of all, we had discussed among our priorities at last Monday's meeting was the data reporting tool that the Commerce City Police Department was requesting. And we received an email from Chief Nichols that the interpretation of the data reporting tool was not exactly as some council members sought, and that it was not about compiling data regarding crime in Commerce City. And I would like to be able to ensure that a crime reporting tool provided to the community is part of our priorities.
Yes, ma'am. I don't know if that's an opportunity for me to speak, but we are absolutely working on that for council and for the community at large. We've rolled out some items in the last few weeks that staff is taking a look at, and we're trying to limit the amount of man hours that are required to produce the report. But yes, those things are coming your way.
So you are able to collect the data?
Man, we've always been able to collect it. The problem has been the ability to report it, where we don't release sensitive information out to the public.
Okay, then we, some of us did see not only your stolen vehicle report for November, but also an overview of all of the crimes in November. Is that what you're referring to?
Yes, ma'am. Those are things that we're piloting right now. Again, they're a little bit time consuming for staff. We're working on trying to automate that to get that so that it'll do it automatically. That's a work in progress, but currently we should be able to produce those reports to some degree. I want to be careful that we're not going to be able to mapping features, and there's some other particulars that I'd like to be able to do, but it's going to be a slow process. But yes, we will be able to produce some relevant crime material for the community.
And with regards to communicating information, I was told by a constituent, and I really hadn't noticed, but that the police department is the only department that doesn't have social media presence, in particular Facebook. Is that the case?
We do not have a Facebook page. Part of the predicament with that is the staffing time it takes to monitor that. We do not have anybody dedicated within the PD to do just that sole function. And so if it is going to rest on me or existing staff, I would strongly recommend not doing that. The community will not be happy with it. We just don't have the staff to be able to manage those social media functions correctly.
Okay, and there are opportunities for us because in many ways we hold the purse strings. So if there is a need to allocate more funds in order for that kind of information to get out to our community, then that takes precedence. So I think that would be very important for us to take a look at, and that kind of communication then should be a priority that we look at among those that we're looking at for the coming year. So thank you very much for that. I have another item, And this involves the airport and something I learned via the Airport Coordinating Committee. And I would like to say that it's important information for Commerce City and that we would need an executive session. And I would like to make a motion for an executive session following our next regular, Mr. Sheasley, what was the date I should use?
I think you're looking to put an executive session on the agenda for the next council meeting, which is, I think, February 4th, whatever the first meeting in February is.
Okay, yes. Oh, I was
February
confused.
1st.
There you go. There's a holiday. I forgot there was a holiday. Thank you. Yes, February 1st for an executive session meeting following our meeting on February 1st.
I believe, and the city attorney can correct me, but that's an agenda request and can be placed on the agenda for us to vote on that evening for the executive session, but would not require a vote this evening. Is that correct, Mr. Sheasley?
To put if there's no objection from council, yeah, we're not obviously making the motion to enter executive session at this point. She just wants us to get it on the agenda. So I think we can put it on there if there's not an objection from council. A motion would also be good for a council member to schedule something on an agenda.
Okay, so she has a motion to schedule an executive session for February 1st to discuss the airport. Is there a second? Councilmember Alan Thomas?
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to place an executive session on the agenda for February 1st to discuss the airport. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll use a voice vote. Please use your physical hands if you wish to have that placed on the agenda. And it looks like that is going to pass 7-1 with Councilmember Hurst voting no. Any other items, Councilmember Noble?
No, thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurst?
First, I apologize. The only thing I really have was a quick question that I missed getting my hand up in time for Roger coming out of the COVID report. I guess this doesn't have to be just for Roger. It was just he gave the report. So obviously there's still a real concern about business retainment, businesses being successful through the pandemic, however long it extends. There's a positive shift, obviously, with the governor requesting that we all move to orange. My question was there any guidance, or is Tri-County still working this out? So we know a lot of restaurants all over the state, but definitely in Commerce City, have been working hard to try to attain the 5-star program by exceeding the current health requirements to allow for higher capacity in their restaurant. Is that a program that again will allow to go from orange to one step higher? Are they going to be looking at maybe 50% capacity if you can comply with stricter rules than the orange level puts in front? And the reason many restaurants have spent some of their last dollars on preparing to try to get their restaurant back open for inside seating to meet the standards for the 5-star program. And of course, the best thing is to allow for them to open up and have business, whether it's limited or not. But is there direction or any discussion about that 5-star program now being considered to allow a restaurant to operate one level above orange now that we're at the orange level instead of the red?
Well, until last week, Adams County did not qualify for the 5-star program because the case numbers were not dropping enough. And I have not seen any guidance that has come out since then, since the governor has changed the rating for all of what were the previously code red counties. And so I'm not sure that we know at this point. We're opening the Bison Grill at the 25% capacity level right now, but we'll have to do some additional digging to find out if anything has changed for us.
So just a simple request, if you know, over the course of this week or between now and the next time we meet, if there's the opportunity to ask those questions to kind of further press, is there anything more that we can do? I am in no way suggesting that we ask to sacrifice safety, but I know our businesses have been working, you know, their butt off, putting a lot of risk out there to try to be ready to attain that 5-star program when the county became capable to do so. And you know, I've talked to a couple business owners. I'm only assuming that there's several others doing the same. And so I would just be appreciative if, you know, with the updates that we're getting regularly, if you get the opportunity to have a quick discussion about that and maybe a suggestion, I would appreciate that.
Certainly, sir.
Thank you.
Any other members with the administrative council business? Seeing none, we'll move on to reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mayor. Just 2 quick items. One is late last week, well, I guess it was before the holiday, so on Wednesday, Annette, no, actually on Thursday, Annette sent out the information that staff assembled from the retreat on the 28th, on Monday, and have asked you to basically rank those items according to your priority rating. And we would like to receive that by next Monday, the 11th. And therefore, I would encourage you to do that soon. The follow-up to that is I have the additional meeting to consider those priorities and sort of wrap up the 2011 or 2021 work plan. And we have a couple options. On the January 26th, that's a Tuesday, you have the city attorney evaluation. So I'm assuming, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm assuming that you do not want a 3rd meeting that week, because that would be a Tuesday meeting after a study session on Monday. But you know, you do have the option of either the 27th or the 28th of that week. Another option would be the following week, February 2, February 3, or February 4. Wanted to see if you have a preference and you know, what date we should schedule for that follow-up meeting.
Are there any preferences on when we should have that follow-on meeting? Seeing none, I would say we don't have a meeting on the 18th of January due to a holiday. So how about the 19th of January?
We could, if A, council members are okay with that, and B, that would give you less time. Well, no, it doesn't give you less time, but it does require everyone to turn in their rankings by next Monday.
Councilmember Wadiola.
We have a Parks and Rec and Golf meeting on Tuesday. I would prefer the 26th.
Any other comments from council?
So,
Thomas.
Yeah, I prefer the 26th as well. That'd work better for me.
Councilmember Noble.
26 is good, also here.
Councilmember Grimes.
Got Derby Review Board on the 19th, so 26 would be better for me as well.
Yeah, let's make it January 26th, sir.
So clarifying question, this would be a special meeting in addition to the city attorney's evaluation meeting then, is that correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Councilmember Hurst, did you have something to add?
I don't know timing if that works, but aren't we doing it with the same person? Can we do it the same night?
Yes, it's the same facilitator.
Same night though? I'm sorry,
Yes.
I didn't. Okay,
Yes.
perfect.
Okay.
Okay.
Then my second item is related to city manager reports. I know in the past we had some of the city's routine business that slipped into the COVID-19 reports, and council pointed that out and prefers that to not happen, and that's understandable. At the same time, there is information that we should be reporting to council just to keep you up to date. And so one of the options we've discussed is to use this report time to cover that type of information, more in line to keep council sort of up to date with what is going on operationally. Our goal would be to keep that fairly high level and more of a quick summary, and not get into day-to-day mundane routine stuff and bore you to tears. Does that sound to council?
Are there any objections to that? Seeing none, looks like you can go with that.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yeah, Mr. Sheasley.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to bring up two items, well, three. First, the animal code amendment that you passed tonight. I just wanted to note that is effective after posting and publication. So it's not effective today or tomorrow. I believe it's 5 days after posting and publication. So we can get an exact date on that out. It'll be a week or so, I believe. And then members of the policy committee had suggested I set a training at one point on procedure in meetings. I know we did that a couple years ago with the prior council. We have kind of a robust few weeks of meetings and limited agenda space available. I wanted to gauge if anybody on council that either hasn't been on for a while wanted to do that separately, or if I should do that as a council meeting. Probably it would be sometime in March at this point, given our agendas. So I'd be happy to set up a separate component, non-mandatory thing if there's interest. Otherwise, I'll just set it for an item in March and we can go over some things.
Councilmember Noble.
I'm not sure we need to make it part of a city council meeting, but a study session would make sense. But not a city council meeting, since it wouldn't be doing city business, but process.
Any other opinions on this item? Do you have a slot? You can slot it into a study session?
We can find something. It'll be a little ways out, but in the meantime, call me if you have questions. We're trying to put in things about amendments on ordinances. I know we have the big one with the oil and gas coming up in early February. So we'll probably talk about that at the time, but give me a call if you have any questions. Thank you all. Happy New Year.
Thanks, sir. Any other council members wishing to make a report? Councilmember Hurst.
Yeah, my report is only to say Happy New Year to everybody here on council and on city staff and everybody out there. Although the bar was set pretty low in 2020, I really looking forward to 2021 and hoping for some normalcy and to continue to get some good stuff done. So Happy New Year. I appreciate all of you.
Councilmember Noble.
Those are wonderful remarks, and I hate to bring up business after what Councilmember Hurst said, and I certainly endorse everything he said and wish everyone a very happy 2021, a much better 2021 than 2020. But I do have a question. This came to mind because of the letter that we received from Oakwood Homes and Fullenwider that was going to the Planning Commission regarding the oil and gas regulations. And that letter, if it was received by a certain date, would be included in the packet that would go to the Planning Commission. What ability do residents or organizations have to include information in the packet that comes to either the city council or the planning commission?
Thank you, Councilmember. No, great question. I would typically, and I would hope that, as council receives information from a resident, same thing with planning commission, we always encourage them to deliver that to staff. That ensures that we have it as part of our public file, our public record. But it also allows us to make sure that, once again, with emails and once again, the transference of information, some things may not be sent to all of council members or all of commissioners because somebody might type a digit off here or there. So by one council member or one commissioner getting it and then sending it to myself to be able to make sure that it gets into the packet for my staff accordingly when we receive it, or that we can present it at the public meeting that we have received correspondence, because that is part of our protocol and process during the public hearing process to make sure that those comments have been received and have been shared for the commission and council's information so that they can make that informed decision. So I would encourage that if you're getting that type of information from residents, is to be able to push that down to the interim city manager and or myself to make sure that we get it into the packet of materials or introduced at the appropriate time when it's received.
What happened with the letters that Oakwood Homes and Fullenwider sent? Did they go with the agenda that was posted on Thursday or Friday, or are they going to be presented to the Planning Commission on Tuesday night? Because they take a very particular point of view, and that there is no countering point of view. And I think that seems inherently unfair on the face of it.
Good question, ma'am. Those were included in the packet. And I would say it is not atypical for us to receive one point of view on the matter that may be going before a commission or a council. We don't look at points of review. We take a neutral position as it relates to commentary that's provided or that we've received. We want to make sure that that information is provided to the council for its interpretation, for its question, and obviously our answering if they ask us as staff to respond. But for us, it is our process that regardless if someone is in favor or in opposition, we're going to take whatever comments that we receive from all members of our community to include those in the packet for review and discussion.
Okay, so if you had received a position regarding the regulations by the same deadline that Mr. Hayes pointed out in his cover email from an organization who had a different point of view, would that have been included in the packet?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, and so that deadline is something that everyone should be aware of, that in fact, it's not by noon on Monday, it's actually several days in advance if you want to be included in the agenda packet that is posted on our city's website and is provided to us.
I would share with you, ma'am, that we have obviously two opportunities, and actually a number of different opportunities in between when the packet has been published and readily available for the community, for them to continue to submit comments that we can still present up until noon on the day of the hearing for planning commission. So for instance, for tomorrow, noon of tomorrow, we'll be able to receive comments that may be either in opposition and or in favor, or question certain language that may be within the land development code ordinance update for oil and gas. I would say generally we do not publicize the requirement for when somebody would like to submit a letter to be included in the packet. Once again, now, if a resident reaches out to us, or if a concerned community member reaches out to us, we're going to share that information so that they are knowledgeable of when, at the earliest, that we can have something be included in the packet as part of our publication, or presented on the day of the hearing, and when that cutoff is for said consideration. So,
Do planning commissioners have city email addresses also?
to my knowledge, ma'am, they do not. But I'd have to double check that, because once again, we try to present that information to them at the meeting, or we send it to the emails that they provided to us as part of the commission.
Okay, it is something that I'd be very interested in learning more about. Maybe it can be part of the same study session that Mr. Sheasley is going to show us about process, so that it's an even playing field. That's all I'm looking for, is an even playing field. Thanks very much. And Happy New Year again.
Happy New Year.
Any other council members with any reports to make? Seeing none, we'll move on to mine. I would also like to wish everyone a Happy New Year, and hopefully it is more prosperous and a little bit easier on everybody to get through this coming year than it was last year. I'm sure everybody working together and maintaining that sense of community spirit will definitely help in achieving that goal. With that, we'll say good night and adjourn this meeting, and have a good night and a good week, and we'll see you next week.